All right, what's going on? Drive time on a Wednesday afternoon. About 14 minutes past the hour, 2 o'clock. Chilly, cold, gray. It's called January on a Wednesday afternoon, but as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That's Porter Larson behind the glass producing the program today on a jam-packed Wednesday show. We will get you halfway through your work week. We will get you one day closer to the weekend. Get you one day closer to football. The CFP semifinal is tomorrow. And then obviously throughout the course of the rest of the week, second game will be on Friday. And then we launch into the wild card weekend in the world of pro football, in the world of the NFL. So we'll get to the latest college football storylines on the show today to get you ready for what are hopefully, at least on paper, I believe will be good games. We've seen some random blowouts. We've seen some games we thought would be blowouts actually end up being pretty close. But this expanded 12-team CFP that we're all kind of experiencing for the first time continues. And we'll see how it plays out. We'll get you ready for these games. Notre Dame, Penn State coming up in the Orange Bowl. Ohio State, Texas on Friday in the Cotton Bowl. The lines have been pretty steady, which is always interesting. Ohio State remains a 5.5-point favorite. That over-under is a healthy 53.5. Not going to lie, that line feels small. I'm not telling you what to do with your money, nor would I ever, outside of saying just don't bet on sports. You work too hard for your money. Keep it in your pocket. Keep it in your bank account. It feels like it's only that close because the game will be in the great state of Texas, of course. A little bit of a home field advantage for the University of Texas, but Ohio State kind of feels like the side there. Notre Dame, Penn State, more of like a pick 'em, as the line would indicate. 1.5 points is the spread there. So one day closer to what should be some fun college football, as we'll get a little football back in our lives coming up tomorrow. And then the NFL takes center stage on Saturday with the Chargers and the Texans, Steelers and the Ravens. Sunday's tilt, Broncos, Bills, Packers, Eagles, Commanders, Bucks. Monday night game will be the Vikings and the Rams. Don't forget, we are your home of the best and biggest live football events in this market. We'll let you know what the schedule is coming up throughout the course of the week and over the weekend as well. It's not too often that we get an NBA game in early to mid-January that elicits the excitement that Thunder Cavs seems to be generating today. Both these teams are on pace for over 70 wins in the regular season. Cavs are 31-4. The Thunder are 30-5. That game is at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse in Cleveland. The Cavs are a slight favorite. But a lot of people are going to be watching this one tonight. Was looking forward to little Celtics Nuggets last night, but Jokic didn't play. The Utah Jazz. In a way, that's like the perfect, in my opinion. I think there are a lot of people that have a bunch of different opinions on what the Jazz are doing right now. If you can play a close game against a pretty good team, the Hawks are good, not great, and end up losing like that, it's almost like best case scenario. But I'll say this, the Jazz have been a lot more competitive, even in losses as of late, and you're starting to see some things that indicate Will really is a very bright offensive coach, and some of these players are starting to pop in a way that I think is good news. We'll talk some Jazz basketball, but Trae Young with a half-court heave at the buzzer to send Atlanta to a 124-121 win. Quinn Snyder in town. Texted him. I told him I was a big fan of that last play call. And he said it's better to be lucky than good. But good to have Quinn back in town and some Jazz basketball on the show today. Utah men's hoops. Oh, man. It started off so well. And Gabe was making some shots early. And it was actually a pretty close game early on last night in Ames, Iowa, a place where Iowa State does not lose basketball games. That makes it 27 straight games. Iowa State has one at home. And after that decent start for the Utes, it escalated very quickly. 82-59, your final score there. And the Utes are still looking for their first Big 12 win. Will it come at the Huntsman Center against Oklahoma State coming up? So get to some Utah men's basketball. The women are having an excellent year. They've got a big game tonight against K-State. That's going to be at 7 o'clock. You can see it on ESPN+. Of course, you can hear it on this radio station, so we'll get you ready for that game as well. So a lot to do on the program today. Of course, still a lot of football to talk about, both college and pro. Lean into a little Utah Jazz, some NBA today, some college hoops on the Utah men's and women's side. BYU lost again last night at home to Texas Tech. They could not make a shot. Could not hit the broadside of the barn. So a couple of losses last night for our local college basketball teams. But good guest list on this Wednesday to get you halfway through that work week. And one day closer to the weekend, we'll start things off with the voice himself, Bill Riley. Voice of the Utes, Riles will stop by. Neil Smith behind the glass, talk a little Utah Hockey Club, some NHL. Our guy CK, Chris Kamrani, will be live in studio coming up at 3:30. And then Sarah Todd stops by as well, the Utah Sports Writer of the Year for the second time. So we'll bring in Sarah Todd today. Bill Riley, Neil Smith, Chris Kamrani, Sarah Todd, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners, and that guy, Porter Larson, on a Wednesday afternoon. Were you watching in real time when Trey hit that half-court shot?
I was not, but I was. This is the funny part about covering sports and having to keep up with them. I was like 12 minutes behind, right? And I got the notification right as he hit the shot, so it spoiled the ending. But that's kind of par for the course. That seems to happen to me a lot because when you're trying to catch up and watch all of the games, you gotta pause, you gotta go in and rewind, record, and that was the case yesterday. But I did catch the majority of the second half, and man, a really fun game. And yeah, I was in here producing the Utes game and watching that. Kind of the result you want if you're a Jazz fan right now?
In my opinion, yes. I mean, people can think differently. The Utes started out so well, man. There was so much promise. Gabe was hitting some shots. They were guarding, getting some offensive boards, and then boom. Well, bottom fell off.
You heard what Sean Mooney had to say on the show yesterday, which was if Utah can shoot the lights out, which they're capable of doing, they can stick in this game. That's what happened early on. And then, like you and I talked about, Spence, I just thought if they could keep it around that spread, right? I think it was 16, 17, 18 points or something last night. That would be a positive result for Utah. Now, they lost by 23, but the game was within that 15 to 20 point spread for the majority of it. And, man, Iowa State, when we get into February and March, keep an eye on that team because they are really, really good. And I think that even though Utah lost by 23, it's the best they've looked so far in conference play. Think of that what you will.
God bless you. Good job.
What?
No, that's as positive as you can make last night. I can't do any better.
Is that better? Is that not the best they've looked in conference play?
Well, sure. Utah basketball, don't lose by 17. Our new mantra. All right, we'll bring in Riles right out of the gates today before we get to Bill on a Wednesday, courtesy of our friends at Standard Restaurant Supply. Your tailgate headquarters, get everything you need to make your tailgate epic. Stop by their location, 3500 Southwest Temple, or online at standardrestaurant.com. It's time now for your opening tip. So I'll just say I was caught a little bit off guard last night after the show when I was sent a link to an article by Joe Coles of the Deseret News. Shout out to Joe Coles for getting the exclusive with Mark Harlan. Mark Harlan decided to give his exclusive to the Deseret News, and you know. So Mark will be on the program tomorrow with Sean O'Connell. So Sean's show in the midday. Mark's going to stop by to chat with Sean. We tried to get Mark on a couple of different times, and it has not necessarily come to fruition. Maybe at some point he'll hop back on the show. But Joe sat down with Mark, and it's a two-part conversation. Part one is out right now. If you want to go check out the Deseret News portion, and Joe is on social media. Joe Coles is on social media. You can get the link up on his page. And they talked about a lot of different things, and maybe throughout the show we'll sprinkle in a couple of different elements of this piece that Joe wrote. But really, a couple of months after Mark decided to take the podium following the BYU-Utah game, and that game, you know, when we look back on that game in 10 years, I do think it's going to be the Mark Harlan game. And it wasn't just taking the podium. Mark ran out on the field while the game was still in action at the end and had some very colorful things to say to the officials. At least that's what it looked like from my vantage point. I was down there on the sideline. And we know what he said after the game. That does not need to be rehashed. We've talked about it quite a bit. Mark was publicly reprimanded by the Big 12. They fined him $40,000. But in his sit-down with Joe, he was a little bit more reflective, and I think probably this was the approach he should have taken right after the the incident went down. But nonetheless, here we are. So here's a couple of the highlights before we catch a break to bring in Bill. Quote, I think as we talked about last season, just like Kyle would say, there are things that need to improve as we head into the next year, and I would say the same of myself. I think that night, obviously, I reacted emotionally, and my frustrations were expressed in a way that was not worthy of a true leader of a program of this stature. And certainly, as any leader should, you learn and you grow from the experiences. Reflecting, I felt like it took away from their victory and the hard-earned victory of those student athletes and that program. He said he reached out to Brett Yormark to apologize. He said he reached out to Tom Homo and Kalani Sitake to apologize. He continues, quote, bringing the Big 12 and diminishing our participation in the Big 12 was, in my view, inappropriate, as my statement said immediately after the game. I don't want at all anyone to think that Utah's participation in the Big 12 isn't something that we're proud of, and frankly, we're honored to be competing. So as I said, you learn and you grow. As I ask our student athletes and staff to do in these situations, I was not a great example of that, but certainly I feel I've learned from it and look forward to continuing this great rivalry the right way. He goes on to talk about Kyle Whittingham coming back to the program. He actually goes on to talk about a number of different things that are worth your time, including NIL endeavors and what should be perceived as good news as far as fundraising for the University of Utah, saying they've been able to double their output to pay student athletes. You know, we are high speed ahead to that reality coming up this year of the $20.5 million, I guess I'll call it a soft cap, that each school will be allowed to pay their players. And we'll see how each school goes about this, because there's still so many things that need to be put in place, guardrails, rules, quite frankly, stipulations as far as what you can and cannot do. But the main piece I thought was really feeling like he has been more retrospective about this situation, where he took the podium after the BYU game. And those comments made national news really, really quickly. So it's worth your time. We'll talk about it throughout the course of the show with some guests. But Mark Harlan sitting down with Joe Coles of the Deseret News, and Mark's going to be in studio coming up tomorrow with Sean. All right, coming up on the other side, we are going to catch up with Bill Riley, Voice of the Utes. We'll do some football and some basketball and maybe a little Chiefs. All right. On a Wednesday show. So don't go anywhere. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. One day away from the college football playoff semifinal. Going to do some college football on the show today. Then it's time for the wild card weekend in pro football. But let's welcome in our first guest on a Wednesday. Batting leadoff because of his blazing speed. He can lay a bunt down and get to first. The voice himself. Bill Riley on a Wednesday afternoon. Riles, happy Wednesday, sir. How we doing?
Spence, I'm good. And just so you know, as I listened in to the end of the drive yesterday, I respect the sanctity of the Sportscaster and Broadcaster of the Year award. So I was very happy for Craig Bolerjack because it's very important as a former winner myself to respect the sanctity of the Sports Broadcaster of the Year award.
See, I'm very grateful that that's your attitude because I have my questions written down, and right out of the gates, I was going to ask you about the beef. Because now you've got company. So here's what we could do, okay? You could be a little upset that now next to you is Craig, who has also won this award 3 times. Or do we get robes and treat it like the Five Timers Club at SNL where you and Craig can just wear robes and brag about your awards?
We were going to get brandy snifters and cigars to go with the robes and just kind of sit back and enjoy ourselves.
See, I think that's the play. I think we could create like a YouTube series, the Three Timers Club, with just you and Bowler. But I'm relieved that there's not anger. I was just afraid there was going to be a beef, you know?
No beef. Okay, no good. Beef. Again, much like Hot or Not Wednesday, since it is a Wednesday, Indeed. Rest in peace.
Indeed.
I respect and preserve the sanctity of the Sports Broadcaster of the Year award.
Thank goodness. That's such a relief. And it is an appropriate day. And if the kids don't know what Hot or Not Wednesday is, it's probably good. So we can just move on from it. All right, Bill. Man, it started off last night, and it looked okay. You know, Utah basketball, Gabe was able to get loose a couple of times early, made a couple of shots. Sharab Jamps hit that opening 3, and they were getting offensive boards. They were getting stops. And then the bottom just completely fell off. So give me your thoughts. And look, Iowa State is awesome. They might be a Final Four team. That's their 27th straight home win. That's the 4th longest streak in the country, I believe. So nobody wins there. But what happened after that strong start that allowed Iowa State to just run away from Utah last night?
Too many turnovers, Spence. They ended up, I think, first half 12, 18 for the game. And the thing about a team like Iowa State, especially when you've got great guards, is you know, they punish you when you turn it over. They turned those 18 turnovers into 25 points and the 12 in the first half into 18 points. The game plan was sound. They played hard in those first few minutes, but you can't coach against turnovers. And when a team can punish you by going to, you know, what do they call it? Turnovers equal touchdowns. That's what it was. Those 2 guards just got out, applied the pressure, and They made them pay on the other end. I honestly, and I know the final score doesn't show it, and I'm not trying to shine a light where there shouldn't be light, but I thought of the 3 Big 12 games they played, I thought their effort from start to finish was good. I thought there were some bright spots. Gabe finally getting going again. He had been in single digits since the Eastern Washington game and some of that stuff. But again, when you're playing in the Big 12 and you're playing teams like Iowa State and Baylor and Texas Tech and Kansas and you know, you got to be strong with the basketball. You cannot have live ball turnovers because those teams turn live ball turnovers into points.
And in a way, Bill, this team lacks what I think Craig's team has lacked for the most part. There have been some exceptions here or there, but there just continues to be no ball in hand playmaking initiator who can get his own or get it for his teammates. Now, that's not a mandate, right? So, like, for instance, Will Hardy and the Utah Jazz, they play a free-flowing San Antonio Spur-type system because they don't have a Shea, they don't have a Luka, they don't have a Jalen Brunson, so everybody shares the ball and everybody eats. And ironically enough, where Utah ranks well in conference play is both assists per game and assist-to-turnover ratio. So, you know, they share the ball, they play as a team, but I think in college basketball specifically, you just have to have one of those initiators. Iowa State has like 3. Are there any candidates that you've seen that maybe can grow into that role?
I think the hope is Miro Little can become that guy. Obviously a highly touted guy, four-star kid. He just didn't play very much at Baylor last year. He had a lot of veteran guards in front of him, plays internationally, point guard for Finland. He's growing into that. And I think the hope is because he's a pretty sturdy kid at the point that he can grow into it. He's not there yet. He's not. But I think the hope is with a little bit more seasoning that maybe Miro Little can be that guy. When Utah's at their best, and you saw it a little bit last night, and you hadn't seen it in the last couple of games, they, as you were saying, they share the ball, but they move it. And they did that a few times last night, and Gabe actually had some open looks, which he hasn't had in recent weeks because what teams are doing is they're blitzing him. They're just running two guys at him every time he gets it. He's at the top of the scouting report, and they're saying, this guy's not going to be this. Utah did a pretty good job early against Iowa State, moving the ball, making that extra pass. But to your point, you're right about it. They need to find that ball-in-hand guy, and I think they hope that Miro Little might become that guy as this season wears on.
Man, I'm just looking at the Big 12 standings. I'm looking at the schedule. Oklahoma State's going to be here in Salt Lake. And, I'm not going to be overly dramatic to wonder whether or not they're going to win a Big 12 conference game because it's college basketball. Gabe will get hot one night. The other team will show up and not necessarily be into it. Oklahoma State might be a good shot for them to get a win coming up here in Salt Lake. So give me your thoughts before we move on from this on what we all should hope to see as Oklahoma State rolls into Salt Lake.
Well, I think you hope to see the fight and the effort that you saw last night. You're right. Oklahoma State hadn't won a game in Big 12 play till last night, and they beat Kansas State, I think, by 15 in Stillwater. And Kansas State's not been quite the team we thought, but that's a 15-point win. Any kind of win in the Big 12 in conference play, you beat somebody by 15, that's a good win. So what you're going to have to see is the kind of effort they showed for most of the game last night against Iowa State, minus the turnovers. And you're right. Nobody goes undefeated in the Big 12. There's going to be nights where you get hot. But Utah's margin for error isn't as big as an Iowa State or a Texas Tech or a Kansas. Heck, Arizona's coming on right now, and they've got a lot of talent. Utah has to play, again, because they don't have superstars. They've got to play well collectively together and play hard. And they're going to have to do that Saturday against Oklahoma State.
Actually, I had one more question because on the broadcast last night, we used to have this saying for Quinn. It was February Quinn. When the camera would catch Quinn Snyder, he looked like he hadn't slept for like 5 weeks, looked like he's not eating any like real food, and it just got a little loose for our guy. And typically, I don't see that on Craig's face, but I did last night. The bags under the eyes are big. You can tell he's wearing this, on his shoulder. You can tell, this is affecting him. You can just see it on his face in a way that I'm not sure that I've seen it on Craig's face. Now, look. As you know, he is a prince of a man. He's the best guy, and he's won wherever he's been. It's not like he forgot how to coach. I just don't think they have the horses night in and night out. And hopefully that can change. But you do the coaches show with him. You travel with the team. How do you think this is wearing on their head coach? How do you think Craig's holding up?
Well, he's joked about it on the coaches show and even with me on some pre-games. Yeah, he is a guy that wears it because he is so driven to win. And he said, I've spent a lot of late nights watching tape, breaking down tape. And it's not just that. It's, when your team's not doing what you want them to do, you start being introspective. Craig talks about this all the time. It's one of two things. Are they not getting it, or are we not teaching it the right way? Do we need to simplify things a little bit more for these guys? And I think Craig's kind of looking at all these different aspects saying, okay, we know what we need to do, but are we conveying it the right way? And I think in addition to, hours of tape breakdown the coaches do, I think that he and his staff are trying to figure out the best way to get that message through to teach what they're trying to teach to his guys too.
Let me just follow up and ask you how it seems to be affecting these young men, these players, who, of course, are trying to put in the work to get better. But as you travel with the team, do they feel like they're connected, motivated, in a good headspace, or do you think it's getting to them as well?
Well, I think losing probably frustrates anybody, but I'll say this is a really good bunch of kids and really well connected. And I've not seen any, infighting or anything like that. They are still a group that likes each other a lot. You're not seeing anybody, pout at the end of the bench or walk off or be by themselves. It's a good group. So I think if you're a coach, you're like, okay, these guys are connected. They like each other. They're playing together. Now let's figure out how we can get them into the best position possible.
All right, let's do a little college football before I set you loose for a Wednesday, and before we land on Utah specifically. On Monday morning, I just sat down. I thought this would be a fun little thing to do for the show. And I'm like, all right, just do the best you can to try to see where you're at for Big 12 football next year. So I don't know, man. I have no clue. I keep using this line where I've kind of leaned into diagnosing instead of prognosticating, because college football is this new living organism that we're all witnessing for the first time, with a new playoff format, new rules to add talent, the ability to pay players and unlimited transfers and all those things. But if I asked you in January, where's your head at as far as how the Big 12 will look in the fall? What's your initial reaction?
I have no idea, because Arizona State was picked dead last and they finished first this year. I mean, there's reasons why Utah struggled this year. It's namely injuries at the quarterback spot. But this it's a good league, Spence. There's not. I know as badly as people want the Big 12 to have a powerhouse. They don't have anybody that's on par with Notre Dame or Texas or Ohio State. But the league overall, it's good. And I don't have a clue, right? I think we almost have to wait until spring football, because there's going to be another portal window to try and figure out what rosters look like. But here's what I will say. I think I thought last year there were 5 teams that might have a chance to win the league. Maybe we expand that to 7 or 8 next year that might have a chance to win the league based on the competitive nature of what we saw this year. But to be fair, I don't have a feel. I just know the league is competitive. But for me to sit here today and say, oh, yeah, Arizona State's going to be the favorite next year. Well, it's January 8th. What's their roster going to look like August 8th? That's 7 or 8 months away. Guys can leave programs today that are seemingly happy. So I don't know. But what I do know is I think the league's uber competitive.
It was such an exercise in futility. I'm like, dude, move on to something else. Focus on – there's no content here for the show. Move on to something else. But I will ask you this. So I was thinking about this through the prism of K-State, because K-State and Utah are kind of built in a similar way. They're a recruit and develop program. Both of them are. And most of the success for K-State in the past and Utah in the past has been from second year, third year, fourth year, guys that have been in the program for a long time and understand what they're asked to do. As Kyle says, are you physically capable of doing what we're asking you to do? And do you mentally understand the task? Is it still possible to be successful in college football with that mode of operation, with that being your ethos, recruit and develop, and then rely on your players that have been there 2, 3, 4 years, like both K-State and Utah have in the past?
I think you can to a point, Spence, but I don't think that can be the only thing you rely on anymore. I think that's got to be part. I don't think that there's a one way, this is how we do it, this is how we've always done it. I think you have to have multiple paths to that. Yes, I still think you have to recruit. It's 85 guys. You can't roll your roster every year. You've got to develop some guys in your program, but you've also got to be wide open to the portal and to transfers and identify those right guys that can come into your program, knowing that you're going to lose some guys from your program that you don't expect to, and you're going to bring some guys in as well. But to say that we're going to recruit and we're going to develop and that's how we're going to do it, that can't be the only way anymore. It could be part of the way. It's got to be that way, but it can't be the only way, the way it was. And I think Kyle Whittingham said as much in some of his postseason comments. He said, we can't expect to have guys in our program for 3 or 4 years anymore. Yeah, you'll have some that are, but a lot of guys might just be here for a year or two. And so we've got to develop an offense that guys can assimilate quickly into. And you've got to identify the right guys in the portal that fit with what you want to do. And then you mix those in with the guys that have been in your program already. I don't know that you can have all new guys. I think you have to have a base of guys that have been there because they're the guys that know the culture of the program. But I think what you were saying as that being the only mantra, I think that has to be part of the plan. It can't be the only plan.
And it does change the way that you have to coach. I mean, there's more urgency now, right? Like when you get your hands on these kids, when you're able to get them on campus, when you're able to hold workouts, when you're able to start to show them what you do, you cannot rely on the knowledge they're absorbing now to pay off in 2 or 3 years. Like as soon as they're on the ground, it's like go, and it's always urgent. But for Coach Witt and Utah football to continue what is still the golden era. We're 2 years removed from Rose Bowls. To get the team 2 years ago to 8 wins was nuts. I mean, last year sucked. We all know that. But for Kyle and Morgan and that staff to continue what I perceive to be the golden era of college football, the urgency to try to acclimate right away when the kids get on the ground, it's like heightened. That's got to be a tough task to try to get these. Now, the good news is I guess everybody else is doing it as well. But how would you articulate how the process has to be expedited with this new reality of maybe only having players for a year or two at the most?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying a minute ago. I think you have to simplify your philosophy just a little bit. So guys that are coming in that have played football other places, again, you're still speaking the same football language. It's just kind of different dialects. So I think you have to simplify it down a little bit to what they are and who they are. But you have to find the right football players for you that fit you and you think are going to be able to – you're not going to overhaul completely who you are, but maybe you just have to tweak that a little bit. And to the point you were just making a second ago, I know that Utah fans were disappointed by this year. And, the standard is high. It's the first losing season in 11 years. But it is just one losing season. And we all know – average quarterback play would have had you right there in the mix for a Big 12 title game, appearance. So I don't think the sky has fallen. I don't think Kyle Whittingham and Morgan Scalley and those guys up there have forgotten how to coach football. I think they, like everybody else, are adapting in a new era. But I also think that a healthy quarterback and a good offensive system this year has you right back in the mix again.
And, to the point of continuity, I suppose if that's kind of the deal when it comes to familiarity right out of the gates, it can only be good news that Devin Dampier played last year for Jason, right? I mean, it would probably be different if Jason wasn't bringing his quarterback with him. But because Devin is familiar with what he's being asked to do, that continuity is not something you have to build from the ground up. I guess that's one way to look at it, yeah?
Absolutely. And your most important position on the field is in lockstep with your offensive coordinator. You've also brought a couple of other New Mexico players to the program as well, and that's not going to hurt. You bring a wide receiver to the program that now can help the wide receiver room. You bring a running back to the program that can now help the running back room. So I think all of that certainly helps. On the defensive side of the football, you don't have to worry about that because Scalley and that defense and the majority of those guys are back. And so I think, but you're absolutely right. The assimilation of the offense certainly helps when the quarterback and a couple of new pieces know that offense inside and out.
So it's been a few weeks since we've been able to catch up with you. And since we last spoke, Keanu Tanavasa has decided to head down and play for Kalani and head down to Provo. He took some heat, and you understand why. I mean, he took to social media to kind of chastise players who claimed they were all in and then left, like Cameron Calhoun. I continue to give a little PSA every day on the show. You always have the option to not tweet. You always have the option to, maybe even type it out, put it in the draft. You don't have to send it. And that's players, that's parents, that's fans, that's all of us. So this has been a hot button topic over the past couple of weeks. And look, in a way, Keanu should take some of the pushback as a compliment because he's awesome. And it's hard to lose a good player to your rival. But how have you digested this, and what do you think the loss means for both BYU and Utah?
Well, here's the thing. I've always said that kids need to go where they're happy and where they're going to thrive. We don't tell a kid that's an engineering major that he can't leave. These kids are football majors. Let's just say that right now. Keanu Tanavasa is a guy that's going to play on Sundays. He's a professional football player. He's going to be that at some point in time. And if he's going to be happier someplace else, more power to him. I think fans just have to get used to that's the era we live in now. It's not what it was 5 or 10 years ago. And it's not going to be the norm, but there are going to be some outliers like this. But Utah football was not going to rise and fall on a defensive tackle. It just simply wasn't. He's a very good football player, and go play where you're happy. Utah will be able to find a replacement for him, but I just think we have to reconfigure our minds just a little bit to what this new reality is, Spence. And this new reality is guys aren't going to stay. A lot of guys, not all, but a lot of guys aren't going to stay in the same place for 3 or 4 years anymore. And even if they seem happy in one spot, people have different reasons for wanting to go, whether it's financial, whether it's emotional, whether it's religious, whatever it might happen to be. People are going to go for those reasons. And if the rules are there that allows it to happen, we just have to get used to the fact that it's going to happen.
Yeah, no, well said, well said. Real quick, one more football thing. Now, look, as you referenced, there's another transfer portal window that opens up in the spring. But it feels like for now, this is the group, right? Feels like for now, it's 25 incoming freshmen, 16 transfers, 41 new players. So is that your understanding? Like for right now, this is the group we're kind of expecting maybe for spring ball?
Yeah, that would be my guess. There might be maybe an addition here and there, but I think for the most part, where Utah is right now and where most of these teams are right now is pretty much what your spring window is going to look like. Now, the post-spring portal has generally always been guys that went through spring football and then figured out where they were on the depth chart. And they didn't get a lot of playing time in the spring, so they wanted to go someplace where they felt like they could play in the fall. I'm not sure what the portal is going to look like in the spring anymore. Is this just going to be a new round of guys deciding, hey, I'm on the market, come for me now? Or is it going to be guys that are, looking for more playing time that maybe they didn't get in spring football? That's going to be the interesting thing I keep an eye on the portal later this spring.
All right, before I say you lose, I want to circle back to a topic that we've discussed, and you and I have discussed it, and everybody has discussed it for years. But every time basketball season rolls around, we talk about and debate and try to maybe find solutions, be solutions-orientated as to why that building is empty and has been for, a long time. If we're being real, there has not been consistent attendance outside of a year or two spike since probably the late 90s when I was in school up there and Rick was the coach. Now, I'd never want to be the guy that's like, hey, can we get it back to what it was like when Majerus was here? That's unfair. And, Bill, this really is a chicken or the egg conversation because the fact of the matter is if you are a Utah fan that cares about the basketball program, the best thing you can do is to pack that building because kids who, Craig, are trying to recruit, they want to play in front of fans. Now, they want money. They want opportunities to go professional. It's not the only thing they want. But if Kyle has a recruit in town for a Saturday night game at Rice-Eccles Stadium, he can just point up to the stands and say, look, do you want to play in front of this? Now, on the other side, if I'm a Utah basketball fan, I'm saying, give me something to cheer for consistently. So I'm not blaming anybody one way or the other, but what's the Bill Riley take? Like, how do we fix this thing to get people back in that building and therefore maybe give Craig a better chance to, recruit better players?
Well, I think it's, some sustained success probably brings more people back to the games. I know I talk to a lot of people and they're like, yeah, I like Utah basketball, but I want to see them win a little bit more. And I said, like you said, it's kind of a chicken and the egg. Well, maybe if you show up, that helps the winning. That creates a little bit more of an atmosphere. I don't have an answer. I just know where teams win, generally fans come. And I think just a little bit more success on the floor. Well, I mean, you've seen it with women's basketball, what Lynn Roberts built, now what Gavin Peterson is continuing on. I mean, I remember days where they'd be lucky to have 1,500 people at a women's basketball game. Now they're drawing 5,000 plus routinely, 6,000 fans. Well, the product is good. They're winning. They play an exciting brand of basketball. I think a little bit more success would certainly bring more people out.
Chiefs win the Super Bowl, and if not, who keeps you up at night? Who are you most scared of?
Probably the Bills.
All right.
They're just Josh Allen, and Lamar is fantastic. The funny thing is the Chiefs have beaten both Josh Allen and Lamar in the playoffs in recent years. But I think one of those teams are probably going to knock each other off. But there's something about Allen when he seems to put that cape on and go nuclear. they make me probably most nervous. However, the games are at Arrowhead, so I feel pretty good about it. Maybe somebody in the NFC. I think maybe the Lions might be that team too, but I don't know about you, Spence. I don't completely trust Jared Goff yet. Now, maybe if they win the NFC and get to the Super Bowl, that changes my mind, but I still don't completely trust Goff. What about you?
Yeah, I just think with 15 under center, you're going to win. I just think you're going to figure it out. And yeah, there's something about Jared Goff that still gives you the, just makes you a little bit nervous about what it's going to look like in the biggest of moments because he's never been able to break through. But that offense right now, it seems incredibly potent with a bunch of different dudes who can beat you in Detroit. That's why Ben Johnson's such a hot commodity. But I think your boys have it again, man. I think you're going to be celebrating 3 straight.
I hope so. Do you want Rex Ryan back as the head coach?
No, absolutely not. Of course not. No, hire Mike Vrabel. Hire a coach that makes sense, and you got to break it down. You got to go take some ayahuasca, talk to a caterpillar, enjoy your remaining years, Aaron. You have to move on from the entire mess. But no, I do not want Rex Ryan back in charge.
Is there a candidate you love?
Vrabel. I want Mike Vrabel.
Okay.
It makes sense, but he might go to the Pats.
If I don't know where I'd want to go if I were Vrabel. I mean, the Pats are certainly there. There's been the buffer coach with Gerard Mayo, so you're not following Belichick directly. But, yeah, they also have a quarterback, and the Jets are a little wonky at quarterback right now. So I'd probably lean toward the Pats, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, enjoy, once again, cheering for the team that's probably going to win the Super Bowl. It's good to be a Chiefs fan, Bill. Thanks for the time, buddy, okay?
Bowler and I, we would be glad to wear the robes, the snifters, and the cigars and come in studio together.
Wait a second. Porter, did you hear that?
I got that recorded.
Okay. Bill Bowler, robes, sifters, whiskey, 3-time Sports of the Year, the 3-Timers Club Rouse. We're going to make this happen.
Thanks, Spence.
All right, Voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. We've got Neil Smith coming up, Chris Combrani in studio, and another trophy holder, Sarah Todd, Utah Sports Rider of the Year. Busy show on a Wednesday. Don't go anywhere. Utah Hockey Club is about to start a 7-game homestand. So a bunch of home games now for the hockey club, who as of late, they have not been playing well at all. But coming up tonight, one of the best teams in all of pro hockey, Florida, is in town. According to the current odds, Florida Panthers they have the second shortest odds to win the Stanley Cup. Only the Edmonton Oilers have shorter odds than both Carolina and Florida, who are at plus 800. So let's bring in our guy, Neil Smith, to talk a little puck, a little hockey on a Wednesday. Neil, happy Wednesday, sir. How we doing?
Happy Wednesday. I'm good. I missed you last week. I was stuck with a little bit of COVID there and missed Christmas and missed our time together.
Wait, you missed Christmas? How do you miss, Christmas still happened, Neil? You just couldn't be a part of it? Is that what you're saying?
I just couldn't be a part of it. I didn't want Santa getting COVID.
Oh, you know what? You are a prince of a man, because if Santa got COVID at your house, he could not deliver gifts. So I appreciate you being selfless that way.
And that's what I was thinking about when I said to Santa, I'd put out a sign, "Don't come here."
I love it. I love it, sir. Thanks for the time. So let me start with the Florida Panthers. As I just referenced, only the Edmonton Oilers have shorter odds in Vegas to win the Stanley Cup. What should we know about this team who's in Salt Lake to play the hockey club tonight?
Well, what you should know about them currently is that, believe it or not, as good as they are, they're in a goal drought. They can't score goals. They're having real trouble scoring goals, which I know sounds ridiculous for that team, but it's true. They've had real problems in their last couple of games. Their goaltending has been pretty good, but Bobrovsky, who you're going to see tonight, he's the guy that backstopped them to the Stanley Cup, and you're going to get him right there in Salt Lake City for the first time ever that the Florida Panthers ever play in Salt Lake City, Utah. So you see a good goaltender, but the chance for the hockey club will be if Vejmelka naturally has to come through for them, and then they can get some goal support, and hopefully the guns are dry still for the Florida Panthers tonight.
So the recent form for the hockey club has not been good. And this, Neil, has been a theme of the season. After a red-hot start that got all of our expectations probably out of whack, it simply has been up and down from mid-December to nearly Christmas. They had a streak where they won 6 of 7. And over the past 7 games, they lost 6 of 7, 2 of those overtime losses. So what gives as of late? Is this just the nature of a young team? Do you think this is what we're going to see all year long?
I think you're going to see mountains and valleys all year. But remember that they played really well against Dallas, and Dallas is a contender for the Cup as well. And it took overtime to beat Utah in Dallas. So I thought they were playing really well. And usually, what happens in a losing streak is that you play really well in the last couple of games before you break out of it, and that's what I'm hoping, because they did play well in Dallas, they did play well in Calgary. They've got, as you mentioned before, they got a 7-game homestand. Here's the problem with the homestand: they've only won 5 games of their 16 that they've played in Salt Lake. They've only won 5 in regulation, so they got to get more comfortable and get better on their home ice. For example, when you talk about the team that they're going to play tonight, the Florida Panthers, they're 12-8 at home, and you go to Utah, and as I said, they're 5-7-4 at home, and that's not good enough. You've got to take advantage of your home ice.
Now, having said that, they're still only 4 points behind the Vancouver Canucks. As far as the wild card race, the Avalanche would be the first wild card team with 51. Vancouver has 45 points. Then it's Calgary. It's the Blues, only 1 point ahead of the hockey club, and the hockey club's at 41 points. So they're not far out, Neil. I mean, and Coach Torney, to your point, often talks about, even during these rough patches, that he likes the way they're playing. Sometimes you can do the right things, and the results just don't go your way. So even though they've lost 6 of 7 with a couple of overtime losses in there, they're still right where you said that they would be this point in January, knocking on the wild card door.
Yeah, and they've got 3 games in hand on a couple of teams. They've only played 39. They've got 3 games in hand on St. Louis. So when you see St. Louis is 1 point ahead, well, they're really not, because if the games were even, you'd have to give Utah at least 4 points out of those, the points that would be available in those games. That would be, 3 games would be 6 available points max, and you'd have to think they'd get, let's say, 3. So if they got 3, they're now at 44. They're 1 point behind Vancouver. But Vancouver's played less games as well. So what it's going to take is they got to put some games together, wins together. Their plus minus isn't bad. They're only a -5, which is of the teams that are a minus in the conference. They have the least. They're just a -5. You can get over that, and they can turn this around. But they got to put some wins together. And my thing is, Spence, is that they got to do it in Salt Lake City, where they're home, where they're comfortable, where they have their fans. They got to put some wins together at home during these 7 games. Right now is when they need to jump on this. And hopefully the Dallas game is an inspiration to these games coming up now.
It's interesting with this home record, as you referenced, right now, 5-7-4. And I don't know if there's anything here, Neil, but I wonder, and look, home ice advantage in the NHL oftentimes is not as prevalent as home court advantage in pro basketball. I mean, for whatever reason, teams can go on the road in the NHL and certainly Stanley Cup playoffs and get wins, and that's not a rare thing. But I wonder if the Utah Hockey Club's lack of home success has anything to do with this has been their home for a matter of months. Does that make sense? Like, this is not a spot where these players have lived for years and years and years, and maybe that's one of the reasons they don't seem to be as comfortable at home. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. What do you think?
You know what? I don't. We can't read into the psychology of it. I don't know either, but I do know that when they were playing in that little bandbox in Arizona, in Phoenix, in that Mullet Arena, which was a college arena, they had a great home record. Teams would come in there and, they weren't used to it. They weren't used to playing in a college rink, and they would throw them off, I guess. But Arizona had a great home record. Now you turn around and they're in a beautiful building in Salt Lake City, and they can't get it going at home. And they will. They will get it going at home. But, it's they just gotta get used to the fact that they're there now, and that their fans are there, and that they gotta be more confident at home and not be worried. Sometimes, Spence, don't you think that teams, when they're performing in front of their own fans, squeeze a stick a little bit harder because they want so badly to do well in front of their fans? But when you're on the road, you sort of, you're a little bit more at ease because everybody in the building wants you to lose. So what the heck? I'm going to play this as hard as I can. I just think this can happen, and especially with a younger team. So let's hope tonight, when the Panthers come in, who are have not been scoring goals, they can get a couple by Bobrovsky, and Florida can't get any by Vejmelka.
On the other side, Neil, they have 12 road wins, which is good for 4th in the conference. Only Minnesota, Winnipeg, and Colorado have more road wins than the Utah Hockey Club. They have more road wins in Vegas. They have more road wins in Edmonton, Vancouver. I could keep going. What does that say to you, that this young team seems to be able to go away from home and get good results?
Well, what it says to me in my intuition is that they're a group that's very close together and they're bond well together, because when you're on the road, I can't emphasize this enough, there's 25 or 30 in your traveling party, whatever it is. There's 20 players and whatever, trainers and coaches and all that stuff. Those are the only ones in that building on the road that want you to win. Just you guys. The rest of the 18,000 all want you to lose. So there's sort of a thing there. It's us against the world. And sometimes when you're on the road, you can use that. And if you like each other, it's even better. And it seems to me that you can't do well on the road if you're not a team that's close. I just don't see how it's possible. And so, you know what? They'll figure this home thing out and get it going at home and continue doing whatever they're doing on the road that's made them so good.
I was, as we referenced earlier, I was looking at the Vegas odds as far as who they like to win the Stanley Cup. Utah Hockey Club plus 7,500. Nobody thinks the Hockey Club is winning the Stanley Cup. But right in front of the Utah Hockey Club is the New York Rangers at plus 5,000. What's going on back there, Neil? What's going on with my Rangers?
Well, it's crazy. The team imploded. We talked a little bit about this 2 weeks ago, and since you and I have talked, it's not gotten any better. They played Dallas last night in Madison Square Garden, got a 3-0 lead on them early in the game. Dallas scored it near the end of the first period to make it 3-1 Rangers going into the locker room. The game ended on an overtime goal by Dallas to win 4-3. So, or 5-4, sorry, 5-4. So the Rangers had a lead of 3-0, 3-1, and then 4-3, and couldn't hold any of those leads. So Chris Kreider's out on IR, injured reserve, and the captain's gone, Trouba's gone. They're in a mess. They're a mess. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, and I would never have said that, a month or two ago, but they have just spun out of control.
What, I'm putting you on the spot here, but we're going to expand our imagination in the new year, Neil. We're going to get really weird. And I know there's like the Carolina Hurricanes, I think in the early 2000s, the Mighty Ducks, who are no longer the Mighty Ducks. I know there have been long shots that have won the Stanley Cup. I don't know that there's ever been a plus 7,500 team to win the Stanley Cup. But when you look at where the Utah Hockey Club are, despite their recent run of play, despite the fact they're not even in the playoffs right now, they're really mid-table. I mean, they're not near the bottom where Anaheim is and San Jose and Chicago and Columbus. So is there an example off the top of your head of like the biggest Cinderella run to a Stanley Cup in the history of the NHL? And are we allowed to expand our horizons to believe that could be us year one?
I don't know if you should really be smoking whatever that would be that would make you think you could win the Stanley Cup. But I will tell you that the biggest long shot win had every series. They were the road team on every series, meaning that the other club played 4 at home and only 3 in this team I'm going to say is building was the LA Kings when they won their first Stanley Cup. They were an 8th seed in the West and ended up winning the Cup. And that was mind-boggling to me. You never see that happen. But that's the one I can say truly was a Cinderella team.
So what you're saying is maybe don't put money down on the Utah Hockey Club to hoist the Cup this year.
Not this year. If you want to put money on them to hoist the Cup, just wait at least till the summertime.
Okay, fair enough. Let me follow up with this, because according to the Vegas odds, they're essentially saying there are 3 teams that have a legitimate chance. And look, I'm just talking about the odds because crazy things that could happen, as you said, 8 seeds going on to win. But Edmonton, Carolina, and Florida are the only teams that have I'll call them short odds in Vegas. Everybody else has at least plus 1,000, including Dallas, New Jersey, Toronto, Colorado. I could keep going. Do you believe that the Stanley Cup winner will come from that group of 3, Edmonton, Carolina, or Florida?
Vegas they love Edmonton. I don't know why I know they went to Game 7, but they've never really, to me, shown that they've got that Stanley Cup pedigree. They've got 2 of the best players in the league for sure, but I think, and Carolina, I don't know that they have the goaltending to win. They're going to a goaltender to prove that he can win has to do it. In other words, you never, like Bobrovsky, nobody ever thought that he would win, and now that he's won the Stanley Cup, he's capable of it. Darcy Kemper, who won it for Colorado a few years ago, now he's capable of it. I think that Florida and Edmonton are probably the favorites, but Colorado is really good if they get their goaltending straightened around. Dallas is really good. And so, the Devils are surprising in the East. I don't think they're there yet, but I think my thing right now, and I hope nobody takes my advice, I would call it between, again, Edmonton and the Panthers.
Why doesn't Vegas like Winnipeg, who just won't slow down? They're plus 1,600. I mean, they're smoking everybody, and I ask you about them every week, but they're not even close as far as the betting odds go to even making the Stanley Cup or hoisting the thing. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Unless the guys in Vegas don't have a clue where Winnipeg even is on the map. I mean, it's probably an antithesis of Las Vegas is Winnipeg, Manitoba, where my mother was born and raised, one of the coldest places on earth. But Winnipeg's even behind Toronto, and Toronto has not had the year that Winnipeg is having and enjoying. And Winnipeg has Connor Hellebuck, who won the Vezina last year, and I will tell you, is in my mind is the odds-on favorite to win it again this year. So I can't answer that why they're not there. I think that why is Edmonton there and this team not? I don't know. Unless everybody's just in love with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl of the Oilers, and they're not in love with the guys on Winnipeg.
So we already saw Chicago move on from their coach, Luke Richardson. Are there any other coaches out there you think are in danger based off of a poor, I guess I'll say, halfway home almost start to the season?
Well, I thought Derek Lalonde was in trouble for a long time in Detroit, and then he did get let go, and they brought in Todd McClellan to coach the Red Wings, and they have actually gone on to a winning streak right now. Who knows why, but Derek Lalonde was gone too. I don't know if in the other situations, we saw 3 coaches fired so far. Drew Bannister, of course, Jim Montgomery, 4, I think. Jim Montgomery in Boston. As I said, Derek Lalonde in Detroit. And was there one other you just mentioned, or is that it?
No, I was just asking you because I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
Just kind of that time of year.
No, I think those 3 have been. Those 3 have changed, and I don't think any others will. I hope none do. I hate firings. I just hate them.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, the problem in pro sports, as you well know, is there's so few moves that an owner has or a general manager has that he can do to try to get his team, jump started. That the coaches are the first thing that always goes.
Well, and as you know, organizations that usually find the most success have ownership, front office, and the coaching staff really all on the same page, pushing in the same direction. And when you have a meddling owner, which I think you experienced, that thinks he knows better than anybody else, or someone else, not pulling in the right direction, oftentimes these things never really are fully baked because you have to have everybody on the same page, which is pretty rare, but it seems like the most successful teams have kind of that trinity.
They absolutely do. You hit the nail right on the head. You sound like the offspring of a sports executive because that's absolutely true. If it starts at ownership, and if the ownership doesn't hire and trust the people they hire and let them do their job, just the same as they would want to do their job in whatever made them all their money that they could afford a pro sports team, they are not going to win. And when you look around the league and look at teams that have been successful, and when we say successful, we just mean a contender. You don't have to win the cup every year, but they're not meddling teams. And the ones that are meddling all the time and think they've got a better way of doing things, they rarely get anywhere because you just can't operate in those conditions if you're a sports guy. You know there's certain things you've got to do, and you know it. You've been trained to do it, and if the owners don't let you do it, well, then you're not going to get anywhere.
From your vantage point, and before I set you loose, I will ask you, and I know you don't know this ownership group well, and it's their first go-around trying to own a hockey team, so I'm sure they're going to learn as they go. But what would you say to our community about your knowledge of Bill Armstrong and his staff and Coach Torney and his staff and kind of the synergies that exist between the two and the right people to kind of build this thing moving forward?
Well, they've been together for quite a while now, this group, and I mean they were completely handcuffed in Arizona financially. And now that Ryan Smith has bought the team and moved it to Salt Lake City I think Ryan Smith has shown some great patience by bringing everybody from Arizona and keeping the same crew and letting them prove whether they belong there or prove that they don't belong there. So, I think it's the right group. I like what they've done, and I believe in them.
All right, Neil, where can our listeners, our new hockey fan listeners in the community, find that podcast of yours?
on any platform that you can find podcasts, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and everything else. And it's called NHL Wraparound. We do it 4 times a week now, Spence. We're doing it. So we have NHL Wraparound. We have New York Centric, which is just about the 3 New York teams. And then we do 2 updates a week called Short Shifts on Wednesdays and Fridays, just to bring the listeners up to what's been happening in between. So, I'm not up to your level yet, but I'm trying to get there.
I'm sure you far surpassed my level on the hockey side, Neil. I'm just doing the best I can to bring you on and ask you questions that don't sound dumb, but I appreciate
you. No, you sound great. You sound, as I said, you sound like you're from a sports family, and I don't know if I'm right about that or not.
Yeah, there's something to that. I should look into it. But look, I really appreciate your time. We'll get you back on soon and keep up the great work on the pod, okay?
Thanks so much for having me.
All right. The great Neil Smith, former general manager of the New York Rangers and the New York Islanders, won a Stanley Cup with the Rangers in '94, spent some time as the chief scout for the Red Wings back in the 80s. He is a hockey encyclopedia, a historian, and it's great to have him on every week to help us learn about this new sport, pro hockey, in our market. If you haven't been to a Utah Hockey Club game, the Florida Panthers are really good. The third shortest odds, actually tied for the second shortest odds to win the Stanley Cup. That game's at 8 o'clock tonight at the Delta Center. You can watch it on Turner Sports. All right, coming up on the other side, it is time for 1 hour of intellectual conversation with Chris Camerani. Big Dave would approve. Big Dave loves himself a little Neil Young.
Good.
It is good, but it's one of those things where it was overplayed. Like your old man was into the metal stuff, right? The 90s metal stuff?
Yeah, little hair metal.
Yeah. And if it gets overplayed, then you become an adult. You don't love it as much as you should because you've heard it a ton.
It's fair.
Yeah.
Neil's a little timeless, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Chris Camerani live in studio. Hot Neil Young take? Let's get it. There we go.
I think for me, the Eagles are kind of the quintessential overplayed band.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think of the Lebowski scene.
I hate the Eagles, man.
He's just get out of my cab. I love that he had to take a cab from Malibu all the way back to the city. I mean, that's an expensive cab ride.
It is. Then he throws him out of the cab because he doesn't like the Eagles.
Right.
But Big Dave also overplayed the Eagles, so I can't.
Absolutely.
Can't do it. Was there a band that was overplayed in your house when you were young, or?
No, my mom has really, really good taste in music.
Oh, yeah?
So she went with the times.
Okay.
So we never overplayed anything. It would evolve 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. I mean, we had a pretty good repertoire going. I mean, we would go from Jefferson Airplane to the Eagles, a lot of almost famous-y stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the 80s and 90s came around, I was born in the 80s. She started getting hip with it. Whitney Houston, Boyz II Men.
Nice.
We had a pretty good catalog of music in our house.
See, I kind of nobody cares about this, but
People care.
You think so?
I think so.
Frank Layden, his advice to me was, who cares? Nobody's listening when I first took the job. So that's kind of how I do the job. Nobody's listening. I was lucky that Deb, my mom, Motown.
Oh, yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah.
So learned about all that as a kid.
Supremes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Diana Ross, no doubt. Anyway, Chris, happy Wednesday. Why are we getting you on a Wednesday this week?
Because my kids at daycare.
Oh, I see. Usually you're our Friday
days.
staple.
Yeah, free days. The kid is not in daycare on Fridays.
Okay, fair enough. How's your January going? Things going well?
Yeah, was I in here last week?
You were.
And it was after, it was, I got back from Rose Bowl. Yeah, so I've seen you since the new year. But yeah, January's good, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything's cool.
Just the first Monday in January, as I talked to you about, it just kind of hits where you're like, all right.
It's like a Seinfeld episode.
Yes, and I tore my rotator cuff. I don't know if I told you this.
No, you did.
Yeah. So
Official?
it's a partial tear. Shout out Dave Petron, my guy.
Imaging,
yes, imaging, X-ray, as well as the ultrasound, and I saw it. It's a partial tear, not a full tear, no surgery, but.
Do you want to tell the people how you tore it?
Shoulder presses,
many?
moving weight around
How
the
many?
gym. Oh man, I don't know what rep it was. All I know is I dropped the dumbbell because it hurt so bad.
So what described the pain as soon as was it immediate?
Stinging, shooting pain. It felt like somebody shot me in the arm.
Not like so. I mean, for people, there's a lot of people who haven't been shot. So just
Yeah,
is
okay.
it like
I also have never been shot. Let's be clear.
like a when you get a shot at the doctor,
A
like
little
big,
bit.
big needle.
Yeah,
type
a
thing?
little bit. Just like it wasn't
Yeah.
like a dull pain.
Yeah, it
I
was
didn't
like
feel
shooting.
a pop. It was just
Okay.
like a stinging pain right away.
And as soon as you put the weight down, did it alleviate or
No.
did it continue?
No, it continued. So I went home, called my guy,
Yeah.
and the bummer is that it happened on a Friday, and so I had to wait until the ortho was open on a Monday.
Yeah.
So I'm just ibuprofen, icing,
Did you get the sling?
no sling,
No sling.
because again, partial tear. I can do this, right? I can't do the side.
Okay.
How's your health, by the way?
It's great, man.
What's the worst injury you've ever had?
Oh, I've had lots of minor ones. I tore my MCL when I was 19. Didn't get surgery.
Mm.
To me, the most debilitating injury I've had was I don't know what the official diagnosis was like a lower back issue. Right before COVID, my friends and I were playing spike ball a lot
Okay.
when we were younger. This was
Mhm.
in my early 30s. And it requires a lot of diving. And just one jump, one dive, I just felt it. And I was just in a very bad state. Like I was on muscle relaxers, and it was not a good thing.
And that was a back issue.
Back issue, yeah.
Back issues are the worst. Anyway, there you go. Enough conversation about aging and hurting yourself all the time. Let's see. Where do we want to start today, CK?
Hot or not Wednesday? What I'll tell you.
Probably not.
I'll tell you what's not hot.
What-
Back injuries.
What is okay? Not hot. Well, okay. Back injuries, not hot.
Not hot.
What's hot on a Wednesday right now?
Going to the gym apparently.
No, that's not hot. Not hot at all. Wonder how many listeners have any frame of reference for what we're talking about. As far as
We could talk about Traegers if you want.
an old feature back in the day. No, we can move on from it. All right, the you know what? Here's what I'll ask you, and I'm quite sure if we could find an answer, we do people big time favor. I am still stunned, even though it's been a number of years, that the Utah basketball program cannot consistently find their way back to even semi-relevance. And I feel bad being overly critical because I like Craig, and he's won wherever he's been prior to this stop. And I watch every game. I watched last night. I don't view this as a coaching issue. Craig enters the gym every night with a talent discrepancy and a talent gap that in the Big 12 is undeniable. But it's hard to recruit to a basketball program that does not have fans to show up to watch the games. And I'm not blaming the fans, because you have to have a product that's engaging, that's entertaining. And so there's this chicken or the egg thing that I've been talking about this week. I do think if that building was full, it would help Craig recruit, because players want to play in front of fans. But I also understand a fan base. It's like, dude, they get housed every Big 12 game they play. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. You were around back in the day when Utah basketball. I mean, you remember when Utah basketball was at its heyday. And I'm never going to be the guy that says, how do we get it back to the Majerus years? Yeah. But your thoughts on this program that year in and year out just can't find its way back?
Well, I'll go back in time. My junior year of college was Jim Boylan's best year. Jim Boylan.
Luka Dircha. Little 5 seed, I believe.
Tyler Kepke.
Carlin
Brown. Kim Tilley.
Was that Luke Neville?
Yeah. They were a 5 seed that year
in the tournament.
They drew Arizona.
That's
which
right.
Was
yeah.
12 and they lost.
Yeah.
But I know Larry had a couple good teams. He had some pros, Kyle and Delon and Jakob. I don't even think you need pros in college basketball. You just need to have an engaging style of play. Look at what Utah State's been able to do in the last decade with 5 different head coaches. And I know there is a cultural difference where Utah State is more of a basketball school historically than Utah is. But we saw for 40, 50 years, Utah was primarily a basketball school.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's become a football school. So how does Utah, find somewhat of an even footing on that point? I don't know, man. Like, I think it's just getting good players, playing engaging basketball. And, like, there was a talent discrepancy for many years, even in the Pac-12. I don't even think this is a Big 12 thing. This is an issue that stems beyond Craig, beyond Larry. I mean, this is something that the Utah basketball program hasn't been able to figure out for, 20 years now? I mean, Jim had one good year. Larry had a few. So you're talking about, like, 4 or 5 out of 20-ish? I mean, Ray Giacoletti had a good year. But, like, I'm just saying, like, that is a very low clip.
Well, and Giacoletti's good year was with Bogut, who Rick recruited, correct, right? And all due respect to Ray, you always seem like a nice guy or whatever, but you bring up an interesting point, and I don't think this is mutually exclusive. Like, for instance, Alabama has an awesome basketball team and an awesome football team, but it does seem that the Utah basketball program kind of started its slide into somewhat irrelevance as the football program started to evolve.
Yeah.
Do you think there's anything where our fans are kind of like,
well, they're probably spread thin. They probably don't want to necessarily shell out
that's
money.
What I'm saying.
Shell out money for budget, season tickets for both. And I know that, college basketball season tickets are much cheaper than college football tickets, even though there's more home games. But I think I just don't know if we're in a market where people are going to be locked in from August all the way to April.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's asking a lot. And frankly, if you're somebody who wants to invest in a good product, as we've seen the last couple of years, it makes way more sense at the moment to invest in going to watch Utah women's basketball because they're very good.
Mm-hmm.
They play a very entertaining style of basketball, and I don't know. It's just more fun, and it's more fun when you win, and it's more fun when you play, like I say, when you play a style that's engaging to fans.
So it could be something as simple as consistent performance and showing that you have the ability, like, because to your point, there's always been this 1 year spike where it's, okay, we're back in the tournament, and then boom. So maybe, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years of consistent winning, entertaining basketball. And I don't know how you do it these days, but players that stay here used to be kind of the thing. And again, I'm doing the Majerus thing, but all those guys, Van Horn and Britton and Andre and Dole, like they were 3, 4 year guys so the community got to know them. But maybe that's not a reality of how to do. And you brought up something else, like really the emotional, economic, whatever you want to frame the investment as for that long of the calendar. When it comes to college basketball, that's UConn, it's Kentucky, it's Duke, it's Carolina. Like 7 or 8 programs get that type of year-long support, if we're honest.
Agreed. And you're also talking about schools that get that from a single sport, not necessarily the 2 big revenue sports.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think like off the top of my head. Like you mentioned Alabama, but Alabama really hasn't really come on from a men's basketball standpoint until like the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it's fair.
Traditionally, they were pretty bad.
Yep, it's fair.
Even before Nick Saban got there and changed their fortunes. I guess Auburn was good, but now it's kind of like the football team's not good.
Right.
The basketball team's very good.
Yeah.
It's hard to find one athletic program where they're always really, really good at football and always really, really good at men's basketball.
Yeah, consistently. There's always Texas has spurts here or there on the basketball side, but no, it's a fair point. Just curious to get your thoughts because, again, I feel bad saying this. I'm watching them play these Big 12 games, and it doesn't even feel like it's a fair fight.
Yeah, going back to your point about guys who stay, like it is hard to recruit in this current landscape of college athletics. I get it, but you're also, and it might be unfair to compare to other programs in the state. You look at a place like Utah State. Yes, they lost their head coach. They lost great Osibor, who's a great player, no pun intended. But like you have lots of guys that are still in that program. One of these guys who used to be a Utah Ian Martinez, who's been there for several years, and bounce around.
Yeah,
but like if you get players who find their niche and have a role and can help you build a winning culture, odds are you'll be able to get them to stay, especially in college basketball. I mean, I don't think the poaching is at a level, and I could be totally wrong. I think considering the size of rosters, I don't think the poaching is at the same level of football in that, like, you 15 players compared to 105. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and it's proven in college basketball that you can be good no matter your size, and you can make a run if you're good. Again, I'll use Utah State as an example. Like, how many players on that team are Utah players? A few, quite a few.
Yeah. Most, I believe, more often than
how
not.
many Utah players are on Utah's roster currently? I honestly don't know. I mean, I know the Hunter Erickson kid is a bench player. He's a Utah kid.
Yeah.
But the Madsen brothers are not from Utah.
No.
They have the Finnish player. The big guys, the tall guys on the team, I don't know their names. I don't think they're from Utah. So it's like, I don't think you necessarily have to recruit local players to be good, but I don't know. If you're talking about, at least within the last decade, the best college basketball programs to come out of the state between our 3 big schools generally have been able to lock up local talent, especially Utah State and BYU.
Jake Wallin is from Provo, but you already knew that.
Yeah, Wallin.
Hunter Erickson is from Provo, as you referenced. And our guy Brady Smith is from Logan.
Wait, Brady Smith, didn't he used to produce this program?
No, that was Brady Clark.
Okay.
Shout out to our guy Brady. Hope he's hanging in. He's a Utah State fan, so he's probably having a good year.
But,
man.
But like, I don't understand. You're a basketball guy, so you can tell me how this works. Like, how is Utah State able to do this? And I know they're playing at a conference level that is way different compared to the Big 12, which you can argue is the best in the country. But like Utah State was doing this when Utah was in the Pac-12 too, and they were doing it when the Pac-12 wasn't that good. So how is it that it works at Utah State, which Craig had a direct hand in before?
Yes, he did.
Here?
Yes, he did.
So how are they able to spin it forward?
All due respect to our friends about 40 miles down south, watching a college basketball game at the Spectrum
it's the best.
Is second level. I mean, it's one of the best college basketball environments in the whole country. And I've been to a grip of college basketball venues. And I do think there's something there. If you're a high school kid, and let's say you're a top-shelf high school recruit, and you go down to Provo and watch a game at the Marriott Center, you're like, this is dope.
Yeah.
It's sold out.
Yeah.
The game ops, they do a good job. The kids are having a grand time.
It's a wideout.
Smashing cougar tails and milk and just enjoying life. And then you roll up to Salt Lake, and you're like,
oh,
do people know that there's a game tonight?
Yeah.
And then you go up to Logan, you're like, this is awesome.
Agreed. Yeah, it's true. I mean, like, the Spectrum will be full for, like, San Jose State.
And it's cool. Yeah.
I agree. The ambiance matters.
All right, we'll save our football for the next segment. And also, our guy Joe Cole's got the exclusive with Mark Harlan today. We'll save that for the next segment. Let's do we got a couple minutes with this this segment. Let's do a little basketball, a little more basketball. And here's what I wanted to ask you, because you and our guy TJ, Tony Jones, a few years back, you did a really good piece on Donovan. So, chatted with him. My guess has got to know him a little bit here or there. And tonight we've got the Cavs and we've got OKC. And it's the first time in NBA history that this point of the season, there are two teams on pace for more than 70 wins. The Cavs are 31-4. OKC is 30-5. And Donovan has started to figure it out. He started to figure out, like, if you look at his numbers, they don't jump out. They're the same as they were here. But he's not taking as many shots. He's admitted this year that he's tried to play defense, and all of us in Salt Lake are like, thanks, dude. All right, glad you're trying to play defense now. I still think Boston's the best team in the East, and I don't know that Cleveland can beat them 4 times in 7 tries, but it's undeniable that what they're doing is real. Coaching change, different system, and Donovan is really starting to evolve where I think he's going to have now, questions to answer come spring, right? But I think he's going to answer them. I don't think they can win it, but in pro basketball, there's a saying, if you got a shot, you've done a good job. I was never on board to believe that, and Quinn was here last night, and I never thought that group was going to win an NBA championship. But there were a couple of postseasons where I thought they've got a shot. So as we sit here watching Donovan potentially evolve into this space as a first-team All-NBA guy for one of the best teams in pro basketball, and maybe they go and win something special this year, I still maintain, I'll always maintain, that there was meat left on that bone when this front office decided to trade everybody. And for the most part, all of the players have gone on to play well elsewhere. Royce O'Neal has had a much better stretch elsewhere.
Got paid.
Our guy Bucket O'Neal, one Bucket O'Neal, played well in Brooklyn. He's got a good role in Phoenix. The minivan, George Niang, solid role player in Philly.
Yeah.
Ingles is just old now, but he went elsewhere and played well, and he can't walk anymore, but he's still on a roster.
He bounced the ball well.
He does one time the other night, and Rudy's still Rudy. Like, the front office made a calculated move to trade star players in their prime to start this rebuild that in 3 years has not bred anything very exciting. I wanted your thoughts on that.
I don't think it's hyperbolic to just say that the team didn't gel. They didn't like each other. Like, they played well together, and I'm not saying every team that, like, you know me, I'm with you. I'm a results over vibes guy.
Mm-hmm. John Paul, hope you're listening.
But, like, they came to the end of the road, Spence. Like, I just don't really think there's really any other way to put it. Because Quinn left before they traded those guys.
Wrong.
Okay.
Yes, and that's what I'll always wonder.
See, I got my timelines all.
Yeah, and I'll always wonder. Now, I'll have to look at the exact timing. They may have started.
Rudy was first.
Correct. And they may have alluded to, like, hey, we're going to break this down, and Quinn, we want you to lead this next rebuild. So I'm not completely dismissing your point, because as soon as Quinn decided that he did not want to work for this ownership group, for whatever reason, maybe at some point he will say out loud what it is. I've got guesses. And when Dennis Lindsay had a meeting with the new ownership group and he was like, nope, I viewed that as a really bad sign, because I have a lot of respect for both of those two. And this is revisionist history for sure. But I even believe, like, you trade Mitchell, you bring in Markkanen, you put Markkanen next to Gobert, you keep Conley and Royce and Niang and all those guys.
But you're still in the middle, man.
But could you have found your, like, if Lowry was what he was 2 years ago next to Gobert with the rest of those pieces, is that a championship team? No. But it's not break you down to the studs and really show at this point no clear direction in a rebuild, which I think is frustrating a lot of Jazz fans.
But you were the first guy to point out that you can't tie 40% of your cap, whatever,
to a non-offensive big. Yeah.
And, like, it might make more sense in Minnesota where you have a superstar player, like a true superstar player. But clearly, I mean, I don't know what Minnesota's record is right now, but I know it's somewhere around 500.
Yeah.
So I'm of two minds of this. I've always told you that the worst place to be is in the middle, where the Jazz have existed for a very, very long time, albeit for a couple of years. I ultimately think they made the right move trading those guys, because Donovan wasn't going to stay here. We know that. I mean, that's obvious. And for as awesome as Rudy is, I think you kind of saw the height of his potential impact on the roster.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you were going to see him reach another level with other different players around him.
I agree with that second point. I wonder, do you think there's anything, because Donovan had 2 years left on his deal.
You could have waited another year.
Well, and you also chatted with Donovan, and if my memory is serving correctly, about, it was COVID, it was the summer of Black Lives Matter and the murder of George Floyd, and Donovan started thinking differently as a black man, right? And he admitted it, like he learned things about his history that he didn't know about and leaned into being more of a voice, which there's nothing wrong with that at all. How much of that do you think led Donovan to deciding he simply did not want to live in Salt Lake? Because prior to that time, my man was at 4th of July barbecues. My man was Spider-Man when there was a car accident. I mean, I always thought it was interesting. There was a camera, CAA, like, oh, wait, Donovan was at a party and people know about it. But
like super handsome with his cool
right, but Rudy is donating millions to people, and no one knows about that. So that was always a little odd. But the first few years here, Donovan, look, obviously, was it Stuart Adams who was like, go learn about your own history?
Correct.
Obviously, dumb-ass thing to say, period, end of story. And I don't begrudge Donovan for not necessarily feeling as welcome here. I don't know what it's like to be a black man in Salt Lake where there's 2.3% of the city that looks like you. I'm sure that's difficult. But how much of that do you think led to him souring on a place that for the first few years he seemed to really love and people seemed to really love him?
I think it played a role in it for sure, but I don't think it was a major part. I think he is a guy that realized that whether it was the ownership group or the front office or the roster, he felt like he couldn't reach his apex here.
Mm-hmm.
His apex mountain was not here.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess he was right in a sense. But to your point, he isn't a markedly different player right now. His stat line is pretty much the same. He's on a team that has more talent, more versatile talent. And I know that you could compare the Gobert with the Allen and the Garland with the Conley, but the Jazz never had an Evan Mobley. Not even close.
Yeah, Gobert's more like a Jared Allen type.
I feel like you would know. I feel like people thought at one point that Evan Mobley could be like an MVP caliber player in this league. And he's proven to be very good this year. Again, I think it worked out for the Jazz because he wasn't going to stay here.
Mm-hmm.
They got a really good player in return, which is something that we should never underscore, because I think you could have traded him to the Knicks and got a bunch of Obi Toppins and the one kid that doesn't even play for him anymore.
Quentin Grimes or
Miles McBride.
Right, yeah.
We had lots of guys around here doing Miles McBride too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, cool, a 6'1" guy that can shoot. They have one now in Patty Mills. Breakups are ugly, man.
Yeah.
That's how I would put it. And there are layers to them. And for the Jazz, they have been lucky for several years, decades even, to avoid where they are now. And now they're here.
For sure.
And it's just the reality of the NBA, which I think, and I've said this on your show a billion times, I think it's why viewership is down. I think it's why interest is down. It is so impossibly hard to get involved and throw your heart into a league where 2 or 3 people have a true shot at winning it every year.
Yeah, no, 100%. And when you don't have the ability to retain the talent you drafted and developed, there's no chance. It's hard. All right, there's a little basketball on a Wednesday. But coming up next, we'll react to what Mark Harlan had to say with today's Deseret News piece. The CFP semifinals get rolling tomorrow. Chris Camerati live in studio on a Wednesday right here on ESPN 700. Chris Kamrani live in studio for one more big segment. Wait a second. How about this? Diego Luna, Emeka Anelli, shout out Nate Bench, called into U.S. men's national team camp in January.
Huge.
Pretty exciting.
Yeah. I mean, it's the camp where all of the fringe guys get a shot.
Okay.
But it's cool that your guy, Mauricio Pochettino's giving some RSL guys some looks.
It is my guy.
One of the great Spurs managers in club history.
Indeed. The Spurs are playing right now, aren't they?
They were playing in the Carabao Cup.
Against Liverpool.
Which I know you know a bunch about.
Tell me they won.
They did.
They beat Liverpool?
But it's the first leg.
Come on, you Spurs. Big Spurs fan over here. That's what you're supposed to say. That's like the fan thing. Come on, you Spurs.
COYS.
There we go. Yep.
Impressive for Emeka for a number of reasons. Like the most prototypical MLS development story. Guy.
Yeah.
Smart Ivy League dude who got drafted to be a right back in Salt Lake or Sandy. Let's be honest. Harriman, and has now developed into a guy who's made the national team camp. Luna, I think, is a bigger deal because I do think Mexico at one point wanted to see if he would be willing to switch.
That's right.
Switch to play for the Mexican national team, but we'll see. I mean, I think anytime you can be an attacking player and play for a guy like Poch, I think that's interesting. So I'm fascinated to see how he does.
Do you think there's any shot either of those two playing a World Cup? Do you think the team is kind of set?
I mean, they're so good right now. I mean, all their best players, if they can stay healthy, their players are starting now at these big clubs. I mean, Milan has 2 starters. Juventus has 2 starters. Pepe is finally coming on in the Dutch league. Luna, Anelli maybe, but Tyler Adams has been hurt a lot. But McKinney, Adams, Musa, it's hard. But like I said, I'm just fascinated to see how they look playing in a national team jersey.
Yeah, it'll be fun. So is this like the Gold Cup cycle?
Kind of.
This
is kind of like the first look of the potential Gold Cup roster.
Because Kyle essentially parlayed a really strong Gold Cup into a World Cup, yeah?
Correct, yeah. Okay. So I just think, unfortunately, for both those guys, they play positions where the U.S. is currently pretty stacked.
Yeah.
I mean, Luna, as you know, more of a central 10.
Obviously. I call him Moon Man, but that's me.
We as the U.S. don't really employ a prototypical number 10. But, Poch moves things around. We're no longer under the casting spell of Greg Berhalter, so who knows? So
this is a little bit like when Tony Beltran got a call up, and you're like, sweet, but he'll be back here soon.
I think Tony played against Mexico at one point, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, did he really?
In a pretty big game. It was one of his very limited caps. I think I just remember because he got to wear the really dope not lollipop jersey, but it was like the red, white, and blue stack.
Yeah.
And that was the coolest one, I think.
Yeah, no, I remember that. Good memory. All right, shout out to our guy Joe Coles, exclusive with Mark Harlan, University of Utah Athletic Director. And you and I spoke about the situation following the BYU game the week that it happened. And we don't need to go back there, but of course, as the story goes, I was walking home from the stadium. You were typing away with your piece. Lovely photo we got that day with you, me, and Aaron. Good picture.
You look good.
We did look good.
I showed my wife, and she's like, dang, you look good.
Oh, nice.
Like,
okay, yeah, we'll take that from shout out Amanda. And suddenly the phone blows up. Are you listening to Harlan? No. Here's the link. Oh, my gosh. And I thought his statement after the fact was something that missed the mark. And I said that on air, and my guess is Mark probably wanted that moment back. And what he expressed to Joe, I think, was probably a little bit more in lockstep what I thought he should have expressed in the moment. But, hey, we all make mistakes, and then sometimes time can give us perspective. And we now know that he called Kalani and he called Tom Homo. He called Brett Yormark to apologize for the comments he made after that game. So I won't read everything he had to say to Joe. Then he went on to talk about some other things, but let's just stay in that space as far as your thoughts on what appeared to be a little bit more of a contrite approach a couple of months after the fact.
Yeah, reading part one of the two-part series, to me what stood out the most was Mark pushing back a little bit on the notion that Utah wasn't able to retain its best players. I think he found, let me find this quote, something along the lines of, I look at this last year, and by and large, we've been able to retain all the key players that we believe will lift us back to success in 25 and beyond. You also lost two of your best defensive players to the portal, which is absolutely, par for the course for pretty much any team in college football. I get it. But I think this is kind of what maybe frustrates fans a little bit. Is like, acknowledge that there have been some tough times, acknowledge that there have been some losses, and don't necessarily try to not puff out your chest, but just make it seem like everything is hunky-dory all the time. Like, it's not. And that's the case for every program in the country.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talked to Joe about the revenue sharing bit, which was interesting. Mark talking about, how they're planning on delineating the $20.6 million that most schools will get, which is going to be a fascinating component to this next, college sports cycle. I would imagine most of it for most schools goes to football and basketball, but I understand there will still be some NIL components to this as well. But yeah, I mean, it's been 2 months since Mark took the mic. I was surprised that it's taken this long, and hopefully he talks to some other local media outlets and gives people a chance to ask him some questions, because I think right now, for somebody like Mark, you're in such a unique position where everything is moving so fast around you in real time. He also has the luxury of having, a stalwart like Kyle come back. And obviously he's, based on his comments to Joe, he's very optimistic about what the immediate future holds for Utah. But we'll have to see how they look starting next year.
Yeah, and obviously, if you're the AD, you're going to try to spin the most positive, storyline and narrative surrounding your program. But I think, to your point, and this is what's kind of bled over into the political discourse in our country and pretty much discourse across the board. Like, just don't tell me I'm not seeing what I'm seeing, please. And from a fan perspective, like, don't tell me everything is incredible when it's clear right now that things are not as good as we're used to them being. And that's Kyle being a victim of his own success and changing standards here in the market. But, since Mark took over, he's the one that fired Larry and hired Craig, and that wasn't met with a lot of enthusiasm from certain people in the market that actually thought Larry was making some headway. That's to be debated, right? But that was Mark's choice to move on from Larry and bring in Craig. He inherited a football program where he didn't have to touch it, and I don't think he has to touch it now. I wonder if part of the messaging is just trying to forward this situation to make it a little bit rosier than it actually is, because he's the AD.
Yeah, and in this culture, we have to do our best of not overreacting to one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And by one thing, I mean just one calendar year. And I've said this often on the show recently. It's like 17 out of 20 is a pretty good clip for winning.
For sure it
winning
is.
Programs in Utah football. Men's basketball we've talked about. The women's team is really turning the corner and becoming, one of the best products locally to watch.
Consistently, too.
The Larry thing to me is interesting. I mean, Chris made Larry a top 10 paid coach in college basketball,
Mm-hmm.
which is impressive if you consider some of the programs that were way ahead of Utah for a long time. And I think the last time Utah made the tournament was like 2016.
Mm-hmm.
It had been a while.
Yeah.
And I don't think that necessarily was the wrong move. I mean, I didn't know Larry that well, but I knew him well enough. I don't know how Larry would have really enjoyed the NIL era, a very old school type of guy.
It's fair.
But I think ultimately, if based on what Part 1 was able to show, Mark is bullish on how Utah is going to attack this newfangled, world of NIL and revenue sharing and all that stuff, because it's going to be way more in your face. Like in the past, it was, everyone assumed that, teams in the SEC were quote unquote cheating or, paying players or whatever. Now, especially if you're at a public institution, a lot of the stuff will be able to be grammaed, FOIA'd, be public record. So you have to figure out where you're going to put your money and how you want to invest it. The stakes are higher now than they ever were before, to your point, like Kyle is a victim of his own success locally and nationally, which is why programs come for his players. So we'll see what happens. I'm fascinated to see what Part 2 brings.
Yeah, and it's worth your time. He talks about NIL. He talks about, raising money at this point, which is probably as important as anything else you're doing on the fundraising side of things. He said they've been able to double their output to their athletes. And the problem without really any data is you just kind of have to take people at their word, and that's hard to do. And I don't think there's any proof or any data one way or the other that Utah is having a problem keeping talent, because everybody loses talent every single year. The national champ will, and some of the best teams in college football already have. So it makes it hard to understand what's real and what isn't. The nice thing about sports is there's a scoreboard, as I always say. So if what Mark is saying is true, next year should be better for the football program than this year was.
Well, yeah, if you get average to above average quarterback play, Utah this year is probably in a much different place, as Bill said earlier on the show. Next year's just going to be a question mark, man, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. They're just going to have a bunch of players that nobody's ever watched. A lot of new players on offense, a lot of guys that you don't know how they'll be deployed. An offensive philosophy that is markedly different than what Andy, deployed, which when it worked, when it was humming, it was awesome.
Mm-hmm. And when he had a healthy quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, healthy quarterback, healthy weapons, healthy running back, deep running back room. It worked. Jason Beck's offense is a little more tantalizing, a little more new agey, by all accounts, less intricate, less difficult to pick up. And you're bringing in the quarterback that I'm not going to say mastered, because while everyone's freaking out about Devin Dampier, he did get 31 total touchdowns last year, but he threw 12 picks. He threw 12 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. A hell of a player on the ground. He ran for like 20 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, like if Utah is going to contend for the Big 12 title next year, they're going to need him to be a much improved passer, because this league isn't great, but you can get beat by anybody. I mean, it's Pac-12.
Yeah.
Back in the Pac-12.
Yeah, it is in a lot of ways.
So, yeah, I think next year we'll just bring so many new lessons for people to find out how Kyle's evolving as a head coach, who Jason Beck is, who these new players are. And just like last year, I would caution everybody to take a breather when state media is telling you that, all these guys are going to be Heisman Trophy finalists and, Utah's going to run the table. We have to see how it looks, and we won't see for a very long time.
You've covered Utah football for a long time. For a while, you were the Utah guy for The Athletic. You have moved on from that beat, and you do more macro-level things, and you have freedom to do other things, which is good for us that are a fan of your work. But as well as anybody, and I drew the parallel to K-State because I was listening to this Big 12 podcast. They were going through the exercise of how this conference will look next year. I'm like, dude, all right, good luck. I tried to do it myself. I have zero clue. You can pull up the rosters, you can see who's returning, and you can kind of see who's already the transfer portal, but it's such an exercise in futility. But the way they were talking about K-State is exactly the way Utah football has been built under Kyle, which is recruit and develop. And the most successful Utah football seasons, just like K-State, have been when these programs have players in their third, fourth, fifth years. Is that still a way you can build a contending, winning football team in college football in 2025?
I think you could look at the Big 12 title game as a dichotomy of how you can do it. I think Arizona State, a lot of transfers, a lot of new guys, young head coach, was able to galvanize that group to a surprising season. Iowa State's in the same boat as the Utahs and the Kansas States. A lot of guys that have been there in that program for a long time head coach. There are a lot of recruit and develop programs in the Big 12.
Is BYU a recruit and develop?
Sure.
Okay, yeah, and that obviously worked for them this year.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're trying to think, out of their kind of quote-unquote breakout players this year, like I said, nobody took a flyer on Jake. Jake didn't have an offer.
Yeah.
He had to go to community college, and nobody does anymore.
Right.
David, running back,
LJ Martin, yeah.
Recruit and develop. Most of the offensive line outside of the kid who went to Oklahoma State. Receivers, Aaron and those guys did a good job. Fessy, they went and got guys like Lassiter, Marion, transfer guys.
Chase, recruit and develop.
Chase, local guy.
Yep.
Defensively, defensive line, mostly local guys. Linebacker room, very, very good. All local guys. Secondary, some transfers, but some local guys. I'm just saying, that conference is a recruit and develop conference, really, if you think about it. Maybe outside of Colorado.
Yeah. No, I mean, and
but ultimately, It is. I agree. It's an exercise in futility to try to pontificate where people will be come August, but I don't think there's going to be that much more movement because coaches want to have quarterbacks in place. I think you can look at who the odds-on starters will be for like each quarterback in the Big 12 right now and kind of get a sense of who could be where. But again, at the same time, like we thought that last year. I mean, we thought Cam Rising and Alan Bowman were going to be two of the studs in the Big 12, and those guys got hurt and weren't really playing at the end. Like Bowman got benched off and on, and Cam got hurt. So like this conference is kind of wacky, man.
It is. Since you referenced Colorado, every time a NFL job comes open, and a lot of people think the Cowboys job could come open pretty quickly, although they didn't let Mike McCarthy interview with the Bears, which is weird. Raiders job is open. Giants job is not. Thought it might be. But maybe it's just the media trying to create a story because Deion is a story no matter what he does. Yeah. But if the right team that has the right pick comes along and says, hey, we'll hire you, we'll draft your son.
Deion in Vegas.
Is that enough to make Deion jump and leave Boulder?
I don't think so. Like, I think one thing people overestimate is Deion's, like, I don't want to say ego, because I know Deion believes in himself to a level that a lot of people don't, and for good reason. He's an NFL Hall of Famer and has proven people wrong in the coaching realm. But the NFL, man, it is unforgiving. You've seen so many coaches in the last few years get their first job, get their first taste, finally made it, fired after 1 year, fired after 2 years. It is not a place for job security. It's not, which is why I don't think Deion will leave Colorado. Now, he might, but, like, you can be at Colorado. You can do it your way. You walk on water there. You made the most irrelevant Power 4 conference team in the country relevant. You're going to get paid more because of the success that you've had. You can do things your way. I just don't see it.
Interesting.
And he said it himself. Like, Deion's kind of bravado, I don't think that goes over all that well with, veteran professional players. Like, I'm sure a lot of those guys, I guess we're old. I doubt a lot of those guys watched him growing up. We're past that. That's our era. But I just don't think that would go over the same in a professional locker room compared to, trying to convince a bunch of young players to come give Boulder, Colorado a chance.
Yeah, it's fair. And you've done stories on him, so I knew you'd have good perspective. All right, let's end on this. Can I ask you a philosophical question?
Orange Bowl?
No. Who do you like in the Orange Bowl? Who do you like to win it?
Who's playing in the Orange Bowl?
That's the cotton is Ohio State, Texas, so the orange is Notre Dame, Penn State.
I'm going to go Notre Dame.
Who do you got in the cotton?
Ohio State.
Is anyone getting in Ohio State's way?
Not if they can make life hell for Will Howard, that's the only way.
Wow. Yeah, we'll have to see.
Back to philosophy.
So I have a philosophical question for you because topically on the show, we've discussed, because we're a basketball market. We're a Jazz market. We're a pro basketball market. We do not have an NFL team. If college football transitions into a pro model and BYU and Utah are involved in that, it will be as close to an NFL team that we've ever had here, and it will have that feel because we'll have blue bloods in town every week. Let's just hope that if that happens, Utah and BYU get that invite. But it's pretty clear now, for about a generation, the last time the NBA was even in the same stratosphere as the NFL as it pertains to interest or ratings was the late 90s. We have the highest watched basketball game in the history of the world played here in Salt Lake. It was Michael Jordan's last game.
So crazy.
Yep. And but it has not been, and to be frank, it wasn't close then, but the NBA was experiencing growth while the NFL was kind of flatlined then. They never closed the gap, and they never will. But why do you think it is? I mean, concussions, domestic violence, everything that pretty smart people have predicted would put a dent in the world of football consumption in this country has not come close to it. In fact, it's only grown. Why do you think our appetite for football in America is what it is, to the point where it's the number one sport and no one else even lives in that cul-de-sac?
I mean, this is not a hot take, but this is my opinion. The savior of the sport was fantasy football.
Yeah.
Like, it revolutionized the approach to fandom. It got even fringe people involved. It's one game a week for not very long. It's September to January. It's during generally the harder months of the year where you want to be inside because it's cold. If you live in a cold weather place, a lot of these places that are NFL markets are cold weather places. I think the demand of basketball is just a lot. I think it's asking a lot for people my age, young parents. Like, I can't imagine a world where I'm like, hey, I know it's bedtime, but I got to see Johnny Juzang. I know it's bedtime, but I got to see Johnny Juzang in the corner. I'm just being honest. Like, it's asking a lot, and I understand that what's really cool and something we complain a lot about everything. It's insane that you can basically watch whatever team you want to watch on any level of any pro or college model these days. You can find a way to watch it. Back in the day, we were pouring through the box scores on the paper or trying to listen on the radio to hear the scores. Now you can find anybody that you want to watch. It's just asking a lot, man.
Yeah.
And football, I think there is this very unfortunate part of the American subconscious that really, really loves to pride itself on this idea of glorifying the gladiator component of this thing. I recently watched one of my favorite movies, Friday Night Lights, which is a great book.
Yeah, it is.
Great show. And I hadn't seen the movie in a very long time. And it's really good, man. I should have had Porter do explosions.
Was Tim McGraw in it where he had the big chew as the dad?
The dad was great.
He did a good job,
Insane, like one of his first acting jobs. But we're on the West Coast, man. Like, I talk about this with my colleagues at The Athletic all the time. It's like some of my friends cover Ohio State or Texas or Penn State. Like, there are places in this country, man, that are 24/7, 365, no matter what day of the year, no matter who's in the hospital, you are going to go to the message boards to see, did we get the 4-star kid? And that is part of the DNA of this country.
Yeah. I know I have homework, but Svi Mikhailuk is starting tonight.
Who's that?
Svi Mikhailuk. No, it's just your take on, I know it's bedtime, but Johnny Juzang's going to shoot corner threes. All right, CK. Great to see you, my friend.
Yeah,
best to Amanda and Lil Leo, and I will chat soon, all right?
Thanks, man.
Chris Camerani, senior staff writer at The Athletic. He's got some stuff cooking. Stay tuned. Let's bring in Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Give him a call, 801-424-DISH. New year, save some money, budget smartly, intelligently, whichever word you want to say. Wireless internet and cable television, 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
This is the opportunity you're waiting for. Don't pass this up. Dish still has this offer. I thought they were going to take it away. I still have it right now, which is you sign up with Dish, you get the great 2-year offer. Now, guys, this price is guaranteed not to change. And, with the recent price increases, guys, if you got cable, you got DirecTV, just plan on saving thousands. Just plan on it. Over the next couple of years, you're going to save a few $1,000s, and you're going to get a bigger, faster DVR, auto hops commercials, great voice remote. You have all the streaming apps at your fingertips. Plus, you get Netflix, the ad-free version, free for the next 2 years. And, yes, Netflix is built into the system, so it's just like a channel. Easy to use. Guys, if you got YouTube TV, did you see that bill increase? Guys, it jumped massively, and it's going to jump again. We'll probably see a couple rate increases this year. That means that you're going to be paying a lot more than what you'd be paying with Dish if you don't jump on this deal. Get set up, lock in your price, get the fastest DVR out there. You have access to all your DVR content, just like you do with YouTube TV, anywhere you go. But the functionality of DVR, I played with them side by side. It's just, there's no comparison. The speed, the reaction, how quickly the system works, how versatile it is. Plus, it auto hops commercials. It'll auto record your games, and it will not delete anything if you want to keep it. Call us up and upgrade. Get the best system out there. We'll guarantee the price, plus throw in dinner at JCW's if you call now. Plus, ask about our internet solutions. I got some great deals there. Prices as low as $35 a month for fiber in certain areas, or $50 in other areas. And if you're spending $70, $80, guys, you could probably just pay a different provider and use the same actual fiber and just pay your lower bill. Same thing on the phone service. Guys, this Boost Mobile offer, guys, they're piggybacking off of the biggest wireless network in the nation, which is the best coverage in Utah. you're using the best towers, you have the best system, and you're going to pay $20, $30 a line less. Call us 424-DISH. It's 801-424-DISH.
There he is, Ryan from the Dish Pros. Time now for your chance to win tickets for the Utah men's basketball team. Text Utes right now to 33986 to enter for Utah men's basketball tickets. Text Utes right now to 33986 to win a couple of tickets to see the Utah basketball team play. The Utah Sports Writer of the Year. Look at our show. Sarah Todd joins us coming up next right here on ESPN 700. Big NBA game tonight. Really big NBA game tonight. In just about 20 minutes from right now, actually. It is the Cavs and the Thunder. It's the third time in NBA history two teams on 15-game winning streaks have played each other. Both teams are on pace for over 70 wins. So a little NBA action. The Jazz were in action last night with a chaotic ending. And I got to say, the first time Sarah Todd won the Utah Sports Writer of the Year award, I had to call her my queen for an entire year. So Sarah joins us now. After your second win, Sarah, first of all, congratulations. Second of all, how do I refer to you moving forward?
Thank you so much, Spence. I think that now that I've taken, once again, my rightful place atop the throne, let's just say you refer to me as you see fit, and we'll see how it works out.
My extreme queen, Sarah Todd, joins us on the program today.
I should say, jokes aside, I'm proud of the work that I do, but I just, when I got the news that I'd been given the award again, it feels like on a daily basis that this isn't a job, right? Like, I get to watch basketball every day and I get paid to do it. And I think that basketball is the greatest sport in the world. And so I'm just really, really lucky, and I'm proud to be doing what I'm doing.
But how good does it feel every time you win it that Andy lost again? I mean, that has to feel so good.
Sometimes I don't even think that I'm getting an award. I just think Tony and Andy are not getting an award. That's
yes.
How yeah.
That was my reaction. That was my reaction. But obviously we kid. We love our guys, but very happy for you. Very well deserved, Sarah. So congrats, Sarah Todd, Utah Sports Writer of the Year for the second straight time. I got to know what the reaction was last night over where you guys sit after that chaotic ending.
It was so funny because usually on press row, we're pretty stoic. I think that, during a tanking season, we have to find smaller ways to keep engaged throughout the season, kind of, as the beat writers. And so at the beginning of the game yesterday, right, Patty Mills comes in and he takes 9 shots in the first 6 minutes on the floor. And so then at that point, it became a game for all of us, let's see, can Patty take 24 shots tonight? And, it's something to laugh at, but also something kind of to root for and just funny things to add levity. But then by the end of the game, when Colin Sexton hits a shot with 4 seconds to tie the game, it looks like it's going into overtime. We nearly raised out of our seat, not because of the timing, but because it was on a broken play. The Hawks almost stole that inbound pass, and Colin came in from the side, swiped the ball, barely got control of it, dribbled a couple times for a step back, and it was a good look, but it was such a chaotic moment. And then when it went through, we all kind of raised a foot or so out of our seats. And then obviously a couple seconds later, when Trae Young pulled up from, 50 feet out and that ball went through, we completely stood up out of our seats. It was just an insane moment. And frankly, it looked good as the second that it left his hands.
That was the thing as I was watching it real time. When it left his hands, I said, that's got a shot, because Trae's one of those that practices those shots, right? I mean, we see certain players in the league, and I always say to people, and it's not always possible, but if you're going to a Jazz game, try to get there early to see Dirk warm up back in the day, which was amazing to watch, to see Steph warm up or Dame. And Trae's one of those players, Sarah, that I believe pregame you see him practicing these half-court heaves, yeah?
Yeah, there's a number of players that are practicing them. And I think that a lot of people will see players practicing these types of shots or putting up a few of these shots pregame, or maybe they see some clips on social media of them doing a couple of them during practice, and they think that it's, for fun. And sure, there is an element of fun to it. But as you said, a player like Trae, he's actually practicing. It's not just for fun. There's a chance that he expects that he'll have to take that. Even just this season alone, he's already taken and making a 39-foot shot, a 37-foot shot, 34. It's not out of his bag, right? That's in his bag to hit those long shots, to do it under pressure. And so, yeah, getting there early to see those guys do that. Keep in mind also when you're seeing it that that's not always just, for the fans. They're getting a couple of reps in.
Let me ask you this before we move on to just more Jazz exclusive stuff. It's been an interesting few weeks where the Jazz have either welcomed in old friends or they played old friends on the road. How should Jazz fans remember Quinn Snyder, his 8-year stint here as the head coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Quinn came here, and I don't think that he necessarily had an easy job of it at the beginning, right? Like there was nothing certain at all about the team or the players that he was getting. And to have the kind of sustained success, albeit not the success anyone would have wanted, but the rise to that success and that sustained success for the amount of time that he was here. I mean, I don't think if you ask Jazz fans, I would think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone that didn't enjoy that era of Jazz basketball. And, you think about the what ifs and, what if they would have moved away from Quinn before? What if that Donovan and Rudy Jazz team had someone else at the helm? What if they'd been given one more year, all of them, to run it back one more time and see if it would have worked? Like, there's always going to be those what ifs. But no matter how you feel about how it ended, while it was happening, Quinn Snyder was great for Utah and for the Jazz.
I'm glad you brought that up because I want to move over into that space next. Tonight's a massive, massive NBA game. We don't get a lot of these regular season like, holy smokes, is this historic start real? And on one side will be the 31-4 Cleveland Cavaliers with Donovan Mitchell really playing a different brand of basketball. I don't know how much of this is Kenny Atkinson. I don't know how much of this is Donovan aging a bit. The numbers are about the same as they always have been, and they were here. But he's taking less shots, and he's admitted on a few occasions that he's actually trying on defense, which I'm sure Jazz fans just love to hear. But I do think there is a world where, and Donovan on a couple of occasions has said he thought there was more, I don't know, I'm paraphrasing, meat on the bone here in Salt Lake. Now, I tend to roll my eyes at that because really behind the scenes, it was Donovan who was kind of blowing the whole thing up. Everybody knows that. I've talked to people in the front office, and it was odd, Sarah. You covered him. For the first 3 years here, he walked on water and seemed to really love it here. And he was awesome, which helped. And it was so fun because, OKC, for instance, right now, they had a playoff experience last year, and Shea's awesome, but the role players around Shea kind of let him down. So, is Jalen Williams going to be better this time around in a playoff run? And one of the reasons I was so excited about that group is that with Donovan's early evolution and with the team that was around him, he got a deep-ish playoff run experience as a young player and a primary scorer on a team that beat an OKC team that was thought to be a super team put together. And I'm like, okay, if he can get this experience now, we fast forward 4, 5, 6 years, and that's where we're at now. He's going to learn how to do this, and at some point we'll have some playoff success. But as you watch Donovan evolve into this stratosphere as maybe a first-team NBA guy and a team that is legitimately a contender to win the thing, do you think it stings Jazz fans a little bit to hear him say that he thinks there was meat left on that bone? Did you think it was as untenable as most? And do you think the Jazz should have tried to maybe squeeze a little bit more juice out of that roster?
I think both things can be true. I think that you can think, and it's hard to say it. I think that there's probably different perspectives, and it's hard to look at it and say it from me saying it versus Donovan saying it. We're going to feel different things. He's in it, I'm not, right? And so I think when you're in the trenches and you're battling, and if someone were to walk up and say you can't do it, right? It's over. You're not going to be able to achieve the success you want to achieve. I think it's really natural actually to be no, we could have done it. There was a little bit more meat on the bone. There's something here. And for those that were in it, I think that that's probably true. I think there's probably a lot of people on those teams that believed that they could have done something more. And I also think that it's a lot easier for those of us on the outside that saw it to say, I think that you've reached your peak here. But I think that, even if you tried, you probably only get to the same spot. And I think that that's where the Jazz were at that point, is that team had run its course. There were problems. And I don't think that, like, when that kind of that phrase, there's a little bit more meat left on the bone, I don't think that necessarily means that team could have done it. I think that everybody felt like they could have tried, that they had more to give, but I still don't think that team would have been able to do any better. And so I think that it can be true that, like, it was time to move on. Blowing the team up was the right thing to do for the future of the team. But that doesn't mean that Donovan doesn't have more to give elsewhere, and that can't be placed somewhere. And we see that with the Cavaliers right now, as you said. I mean, I think it's strange him having sort of the same numbers and saying, that there's more effort on defense at times. But I think Donovan is also someone that winning cures everything is a true thing for athletes throughout sports. And I think that it's particularly true for Donovan that, he is a person whose level is raised, and you can see his confidence change, and you can really see like a tangible difference when there's winning, when there's something to fight for, when he can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so I think that those things go hand in hand, and it's kind of cyclical. Like, yes, the Cavs are great and it's working out right now. Probably wouldn't be hearing the same things out of Donovan if maybe the record was a little bit different.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. All right, let's move over to the Jazz specifically, and this iteration of the Jazz specifically, as you referenced earlier, in a tank season. Sometimes from a fan perspective, it's hard to see the forest through the trees. I'll ask you this, just from a macro standpoint. What are the positives that you're seeing that you can share with Jazz fans? This is such a tough ask of a basketball community, and the Jazz certainly aren't the only ones to do it. Philly asked their fans to do it for like 6 years, and then they got Embiid. And I'm always sympathetic to a fan base that is accustomed to winning basketball, that's asked to invest in a team that's unserious about winning, in the name of hopefully getting back there at some point if things kind of fall their way. But what are the positive things you're seeing from the Jazz team this year?
The positives are, I think, first and foremost, the improvement that we've seen out of Walker Kessler, the kind of glimmers of potential and flashes here and there that you see out of some of the young players. That all comes with a caveat that, like, they're going to need a lot more time than people think they're going to need to. I'm not ready to call anybody a bust after a year and a half. I think that requires a little bit more time, and that's a good thing because that's what the Jazz have right now is time. And then I think kind of maybe secondary to seeing like Walker break out and know that he could be a part of the future and the continued success of Lauri Markkanen and those things is that these guys haven't won 10 games this season, and they're still happy. They still fight for each other. There's so much buy-in in this locker room, and that is kind of at a strange level how much buy-in there is, and you have to attribute most of that, I think, to Will Hardy. And so if you've got a coach that you are hoping to like lead you through what are probably going to be the darkest years of this rebuild, and he's got guys feeling the way that they feel and buying in the way that they buy in, like, Will Hardy has done an incredible job working this locker room and dealing with personalities and making sure that guys believe in him, they believe in the future, and that they believe in the plan, and that he's made every player feel like you can, when we're ready to go and when we have the talent, I'm trying to build you up to have the skills and the experience to be ready to go, and you can be a part of this. Now, that's not true for every guy on this team. Like, certainly many of them will probably not be a part of that future, but they believe they can be. And I think that, we don't know a lot about how Will Hardy will coach and if he's going to be successful once the team is actually trying to be successful. And so there's, coaching question marks there. But so far what we've seen is like he has done an incredible job with this team.
And he does a really masterful job because I listen to I've always been a sucker for coaches post game. So whatever game I'm watching, I want to listen to the coach after the game. And, he and Quinn have much different approaches. Quinn could get, how shall we say, a little agitated, and then he would look at Andy Larson like he was going to behead him if Andy asked a bad question. And Will can be sarcastic and pithy and dismissive, but when he gets into the coach speak in the realm of speaking of his team, he does give you a lot if you listen, and he's done a really good job of acknowledging. And I think lately they've been more competitive. And look, I'm not a moral victory guy. I'm just not. But when we all know what time it is and we all know what they're trying to do, we have to analyze something beyond winning or losing, because if you do the whole your record says, you are what your record says you are, then you're embarrassing and pathetic and the Jazz are unserious. But if you hone in on more of the trends that seem to be encouraging with some of the young players, Will talks a lot about the process and how things actually went really well tonight. And yes, Trae Young hits a 50-footer, but what can we do? So I'll ask you, what have you seen as of late that's allowed them to be more competitive, even more often than not leading to losses?
Yeah, again, I'll say Walker Kessler has been incredible. I mean, he had 10 rebounds last night against the Hawks. 8 of them were offensive rebounds. His strength, his body position, and kind of just the force that he's playing with. It has been raised to a different level. It makes me think so much more about his potential than I did even in his rookie season. The fact that he had such a down year and not just, by the numbers, but man, it took a toll on him emotionally last year. And to have kind of this rebound year, knowing that they're not going to win anything also, that in the back of his mind, I think that it's just been so impressive, and it's really, really great, and it's allowed them to be competitive, and it's hugely important for the future. I think that in addition to that, I've seen more defense and kind of better awareness out of Lauri Markkanen. We know a lot about his offensive game, but kind of when you're thinking about the future, it's you need a guy like Lauri Markkanen to actually not be a negative on the defensive end too. And so that's been great. For a lot of the young players, there's good and bad. And like I said before, a lot of them probably won't be here, but the little things that we've seen, Cody Williams needs 30 pounds, right? He just needs to be stronger. No one's asking him to bulk up like a player that he's not. He doesn't have his brother's body type, but he's also just he's got a kid's body still, right? I think he literally just recently came out of his teenage years. So that's what we're dealing with. And the Jazz understand that, and he's going to be given time to grow into his body, but he's in the right spots. He's making good decisions. It's not like he is completely out of position or he is making mistakes a lot on the court. It's not perfect all the time. He's still a rookie, and there are mistakes, but for the most part, he makes really good decisions. He gets bumped off his spot. He can't keep up with guys right now, but I think with time, it's going to look a lot better because there's flashes with him that's he's a really smart decision maker. He thinks the game really well. And you could say the same thing about Kyle Filipowski. You could say the same thing about Isaiah Collier, Bryce Sensabaugh, Taylor Hendricks. You're thinking about what could have been this season with that. And I think there, obviously a lot more play from Keontae George out of that larger young group than some of the other players. And so there's more of a sample to look at and more to critique because there's more of a sample. But there's been improvements with Keontae too, and I'm looking forward to kind of seeing how the rest of the season plays out with him once he does come back. But, like you said, moral victories are what they are, and people can appreciate them if they want to and, toss them to the side if they want to. But you for this team, you've got to find something. You've got to find something to at least motivate you. And right now, moral victories is the thing that has to motivate these players. They have to be able to see that there are things that are going right.
Yes. Yeah, well said. And it is important for the process. But before you say you lose, Sarah, since it's been a little while, every time I pull up a trade guide primer or somebody writes this could potentially go down prior to that February trade deadline, the Jazz are involved in every single trade, and it's every single preview, and it's easy to understand why, because they have some vets. John Collins has been better this year than I ever thought he could be, quite frankly. And maybe there's a GM out there that thinks John can help him down the stretch, or it's Clarkson, or it's Sexton, or whatever. What are you hearing prior to the trade deadline? Do you think we'll see an active Jazz team?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think generally what I'm hearing is that there's more of a chance that they're not active than there is that they are. I don't think that this is going to be like a big flashy trade deadline, or even one that we've seen over the last couple of seasons where you see a lot of moves. They're obviously not flashy, but the Jazz kind of getting rid of as many guys as they can. I don't anticipate that being the case this season, because the Jazz are having the quote-unquote success or lack of success that they would like to so far. And so there's no real reason to kind of pull the rug out. They can still sit guys. They can still, extend injuries, be as cautious as they want to be with injuries, and massage the injury report if they need to as the season comes into the second half. If I was the Jazz, I would certainly be looking at options to maybe get off the contracts of Jordan Clarkson, John Collins, considering maybe Colin Sexton, but at the same time, those are all guys that have been really great in the locker room and could be great in the locker room still moving forward. And if you're looking at maybe having them as an expiring contract, you have to weigh that against what you could get for them. And so I think that's going to be where the Jazz are at the trade deadline, is weighing whether or not what they're going to get in return is actually worth making the move. Because I think this season they don't really have to pull the trigger as much as they would have had to the last couple of years.
Well, Sarah, what do I say about a two-time Utah Sports Writer of the Year, other than thank you for gracing us with your presence. The honor is all on this side of the table, okay?
Oh, the honor's all mine, please.
All right. The great Sarah Todd covers the Utah Jazz for the Deseret News, the Utah Sports Writer of the Year. Appreciate her time on this Wednesday. 5 o'clock hour comes your way. Coming up next, but before we catch a break, we welcome in Ryan from the Dish Pros. New year, new budget, save some money on your wireless, on your cable, on your internet. All three options. Give them a call at 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
It's such a great job that we have, because we get to save people money. Guys, don't sit on your hands. Pick up your phone and call us, because the offers we have are just free money. It's going to go into your pocket. The credits that you get will make it much cheaper than what you're currently paying for your TV service, and it's a huge upgrade. The Hopper is the fastest DVR out there. It's the biggest. It's got 16 tuners, 2 terabytes of storage. And guys, it's even as cheap as YouTube TV currently. And guys, here's the deal. You're going to see a couple more rate increases and this year, and then the following year, where if you sign up with Dish, you get a better system. The price is locked. Plus, we'll throw in Netflix free for the next 2 years. Now, this is the ad-free version. So if you have Netflix, this is a bonus. You want to get set up with this, take advantage of this, because it's like $370 in your pocket. Like I said, free money. Call us up. If you're a cable or DirecTV customer, also take a look at this, because you're the ones that we see the most savings. And don't get trapped in your cable bundle. Listen, if you're like, well, if I dump my internet, my price goes up, we have tricks for that. We can keep your existing internet, or we've got other internet options. Fiber as low as $35 a month to $50 a month, depending on the area. We've also got this product that I've been using for the last couple of years, which is fantastic, which is $50 a month. Plus, you can get a gift card or free TV with this offer. It's a neat thing because, again, free stuff just by calling us up and saving money. Call us today, and I'll throw in dinner at JCW's on top of everything. We make it really easy. Take care of everything, have it installed for free, and you just pay less for a better service. Call now, 424-DISH. That's 801-424-3474.
All right, the ESPN 700 Cash Kickoff is here. It's time for your shot to win $1,000 in cash to pay your bills. Text RICH right now to 508-777-1000. That's RICH to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win $1,000 in cash in this nationwide contest. Good luck from ESPN 700. All right, 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. 5 o'clock hour of the drive comes your way next, right here on ESPN 700. All right, what's going on? Drive at 5 time. Your commute home on a Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday evening, I suppose, starts right now. Congratulations, halfway through that work week, one day closer to the weekend. One day closer to football. College football back tomorrow. Semifinals of the CFP, both tomorrow and Friday, and then we launch into the wild card weekend of pro football playoffs. We'll let you know what our schedule is here on the station. Don't forget, we're your home of the biggest and best football events live here on our network, quite frankly, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. You got dialed into the drive. My name is Spence Checketts. I host it. That kid is Porter Larson. Well, that young man.
I'm 30.
That growing man. You're still a young man. 30 is young. Don't
over the
start
hill
with me. You're not if you're over the. I had this conversation with Andy Larson. When he turned 30, he said he was washed. If you're washed at 30, what are you at 46?
Yeah, no, let me be clear. I perspective on this, I'm very young. I got time to go. I've got like my family history, a bunch of people live to 100.
That a boy.
So it's kind of like a unofficial goal, I guess.
30 down, 70 years to go.
Yeah.
What if
we could try.
I don't know that anybody cares about this, but what if you're like 85 and broken?
Then I'm out. I'm checking out.
Yeah, I'm Thelma and Louise for me. Like, I'll just drive off the cliff. Like, take Uncle Spence to the Grand Canyon, and then boom, the wheelchair's over the side.
Yeah, I'm active enough. My lifestyle is one that if I'm not like feeling well, I think it'll go downhill fast. So hey, if I'm 80 and it's not looking great, then I'm not going to make it. But that's
We'll cross that bridge in 50 years. But for now, you're still a young man who can also dunk, correct?
Maybe.
At the age of 30.
I think so.
Okay, I want
85% sure.
I want you to try it, and then you got to send a video out. If you can still dunk at 30, that's great.
I got to find a gym like this week because it's been 2 months since I turned 30 and haven't figured that out yet.
All right, get it done. The eyes of the pro basketball world are in Cleveland, where tonight we have really a historic regular season NBA game. We don't get this very often. It's the first time in NBA history two teams are on track to win 70-plus games are playing each other in the regular season. Two teams that have won 15 straight games. We have OKC with, double-digit win streak. So the Cavs have won 10 straight. Oklahoma City has won 15 straight. It's the third time in NBA history that the two best teams in pro basketball have double-digit winning streaks are playing each other. So Donovan Mitchell, Cleveland Cavaliers, eyes in the NBA on this game that is just about to tip, so it should be a lot of fun. Jazz got Trae Young last night. Trae Young hitting a 50-footer to beat the Utah Jazz. The Utah men's basketball team got smoked after a decent start against Iowa State. BYU lost to Texas Tech at home, so rough start to the Big 12 slate for them. Utah women have a big game tonight, 7 o'clock against K-State. Both teams are in the top 25. Utes are number 22. K-State is 12. That will be at the Huntsman Center. 7 o'clock tip time. You can hear it on our station. You can also watch it on ESPN+. 5 o'clock hour of the drive tonight is brought to you by my good friends at Overtime Cards and Collectibles. Just the best people, Michelle and Chris over at Overtime Cards and Collectibles in Sandy. It's the best spot for all of your football, basketball, hockey, MMA, and even Pokemon card collecting. You can buy all your favorites there, from rare sports cards to local legends and hard-to-find Pokemon cards. How about that? It's 2025. Start a new hobby. It's a lot of fun. Card collecting, and there's no better spot to do it than Overtime Cards and Collectibles. You can check them out online at overtimecardsandcollectibles.com, where you can buy or trade. In case you missed it, Mark Harlan sat down with the Deseret News. First time Mark has really given an interview since the infamous post-game press conference after the Utah-BYU game. And I thought Mark came across this time around. Mark, by the way, just a programming reminder, will be in studio tomorrow. Not on this radio program, but my guy Sean O'Connell, the Sean O'Connell Show, middays, 11 to 2 here on ESPN 700. Sean's going to sit down with Mark tomorrow, and I would imagine they're going to talk a lot about what Mark had to say to Joe Coles from the Deseret News. There's a lot there, and it's a two-parter. Mark talks a lot about the NIL initiatives. And, yes, this is an athletic director trying to paint the rosiest picture possible for his athletic department, but you can only take people at their word. And I think Ute fans will like it. It sounds Again, the picture that's being painted is a very positive one, and we are high speed ahead to more complications as it pertains to how you can build a successful football or basketball program. Of course, the rule was passed. These athletic departments and institutions will have $20 million in change to allocate to paying players or whatever they want to do. It'll be interesting to see how this comes down. But that's going to become a reality coming up this late summer, early fall. And, of course, Mark is going to be over, those initiatives. He talks about the Crimson Collective, which is Utah's official NIL collective. And according to Mark, they've been able to, quote, double our output in player compensation. And that's been a big question as to whether or not Utah's in the spot they need to be when it comes to the new reality of college athletics to kind of keep up with the Joneses, as it were. So they will be able to directly pay athletes in July. Again, $20.5 million per school as far as what Utah will have. And Mark talks a lot about the challenges of raising money and fundraising, additional revenue. He talks about some licensing opportunities potentially at the University of Utah, and certainly a plea to local companies getting involved, because the $20.5 million, that does not include NIL initiatives. These young men and women are still allowed to go out and hit the market and make some money on top of what they'll be paid to play at the school. They'll be able to capitalize on simply the same basic economic rights that you and I have always had. It's odd that they haven't had these rights until the past few years, but of course, everything became a reality about 3-4 years ago. And unfortunately, a lot of people have been playing catch up. But Mark, for the first time, talked about the days after that press conference that will live on in infamy. I believe when we look back at this year's Utah BYU game, it will be the Mark Harlan game because of how stunning it was after the game to hear Mark say what he had to say. But he revealed in this interview that he called Kalani Sitake, called Tom Holmoe, and called Brett Yormark to offer his apologies after a very emotional moment. And so a couple of things here before we catch a break, and we're going to bring on the voice of the Utes coming up, Bill Riley. But, Mark had this to say to Joe Coles in the piece that dropped earlier today with the Deseret News, quote, I think as we talk about last season, just like Kyle would say, there are things that they need to improve in as we head into next year, and I would say the same of myself. I think that night, obviously, I reacted emotionally, and my frustrations were expressed in a way that was not worthy of a true leader of a program of this stature. And certainly, as any leader should, you learn and grow from those experiences. Reflecting, I felt like it took away from their victory and their hard-earned victory of those student-athletes in that program. Bringing the Big 12 and diminishing our participation in the Big 12 was, in my view, inappropriate. As my statement said immediately after the game, I don't want at all anyone to think Utah's participation in the Big 12 isn't something that we're proud of. And frankly, we're honored to be competing. So, as I said, you learn and you grow. And as I ask our student athletes and staff to do in these situations, I was not a great example of that. But certainly I feel that I've learned from it and look forward to continuing this great rivalry the right way. Mark went on to discuss the return of Coach Witt. Mark went on to discuss the succession plan in place when Kyle decides he's done for Morgan to take over. As I referenced, talked a lot about NIL, fundraising initiatives, the ability to try to find some other revenue in other places, talked about retaining players, adding talent to the football program, revenue sharing, and et cetera. And then in the second part, talks a lot about the current situation with men's basketball, the lack of attendance, the lack of results. University of Utah has made 29 appearances in the NCAA basketball tournament, 16 Sweet 16 appearances, 7 Elite Eights, 4 Final Fours, 2 national championship games. But it's been 8 years since we've had an NCAA tournament team in the market, and it doesn't look like that drought will be broken anytime soon. Utah men's basketball went to Ames, Iowa, and got smoked after a strong start. So hopefully Craig can turn it around, as we've talked about on the program today. I just think it's a lack of talent. But the women in action tonight should be a good one. It is K-State, Utah, coming up at 7 o'clock. So coming up on the other side, we'll bring in Bill. We'll talk some Utah basketball. We'll talk some Utah football. Then we'll make some space later on for what should be a really fun game. K-State, Utah women's hoops. But Bill Riley joins us coming up next right here on ESPN 700. All right, wrapping up the program for this Wednesday afternoon. Don't forget K-State, Utah, women's hoops tonight. K-State 15-1. They're the number 12 team in the country. And the Lady Utes are 12-2. They're the number 22 team in the country, so it should be some fun basketball tonight up at the Huntsman Center at 7 o'clock. Big night NBA hoops, highlighted by a historic game in Cleveland with the Cavs and the Thunder. Jazz are off tonight. They're back in action tomorrow against Miami. So some fun basketball tonight. By the way, the NFL has announced, and man, these fires, these scenes from the Pacific Palisades in Los Angeles are just horrifying. So this is not the most important thing at all, but the NFL has announced if they cannot play Monday night's game between the Rams and the Vikings in Los Angeles, it will be moved to Phoenix for a backup venue. But I don't know how big we are in Los Angeles, but if anybody's listening, man, stay safe. That looks like some horrifying scenes there in Pacific Palisades and the surrounding areas of Los Angeles. All right, ESPN 700 Cash kickoff is here. Let's get some house cleaning done before we get out of here. It's time for you to take your shot to win $1,000 cash to pay your bills. Text WIN to 508-777-1000. That's WIN to 508-777-1000. For a chance to win $1,000 in cash in this nationwide contest. Good luck from those of us at ESPN 700. Also, my good friends at Prize Picks. Playoffs are here. Wild card coming up. This is a fun way to get involved if you've ever wanted to get in the sports betting space. It's a really easy way to do it because you don't have to worry about spreads and over-under and the money line and who's the favorite or whatever. You just pick two players and then pick their stat projection. That's all you do. So it's very easy to do. And for the NFL wildcard weekend, it's a good time to get involved. So, for instance, let's just use one of the games as an example. Coming up on Saturday, we've got the Ravens and the Steelers. So it would be like Derrick Henry more or less than 125 rushing yards, something like that. Lamar Jackson more or less than 3.5 passing touchdowns. So that gives you a general idea. It's very simple. If you follow football or basketball, it's a good way to get involved. They are giving away free money. So if you download the Prize Pick app today, download the Prize Pick app today and use the promo code ESPN700. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. All right. Before we get out of here, do you believe in UFOs?
Good question. Based on the definition, yes.
Like literally an unidentified flying object?
Yes, but I don't know that that's necessarily an alien. I think it's probably our government, if that is fair.
Oh, look at you. Are you a conspiracy theorist guy? It's a dangerous question in the modern day and age.
I don't know, because it depends on, what is a conspiracy. No, not really. Like, I'm not one that thinks everything's a conspiracy, because if that is the case, then nothing is. I like to have some reason and semblance of science or something behind it. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I think there's probably things in the sky that folks have seen that they don't know what it is, and it's unidentified.
But you're not saying it's some extraterrestrial from a faraway galaxy that's here to steal our soul?
I don't necessarily think so. But I also do have a deep belief that believing that we are the only things out here, like with this conscious thought and, modern way of living in the entire universe, knowing how small we are, I think that's a little selfish. I think a little egotistical for our human race to think that way. There's something out there somewhere. I don't know if it's close enough to be in our galaxy, but I'm not a astro. What are they called?
Physicist?
I'm not an astronaut.
We are just in a simulation spinning around on this blue marble. We're essentially a speck of dust, bro, right? In the galaxies.
Yeah. I mean, we're monkeys on a spinning rock, a speck of dust in a much larger thing. But does that mean that there's green guys flying around and spying on us? I don't necessarily think so.
Yeah, for me, if it's a real thing, I'll deal with it when it comes. In the meantime, I'm busy. I can't
and also
worry myself with things like this.
How long are we going to do this? Where it's maybe we kind of have some evidence, but not really. 70 years plus that we've been doing this. If you go back into petroglyphs and stuff. They were drawing UFOs. So we've been doing this for like 2,000 years, and they haven't said hello yet. So, like you said, I'll wait until they do.
All right. Well, in the meantime, maybe that gives you some perspective to not worry so much about mundane things. How about that?
Exactly.
Brought it back around for a good message on a Wednesday. All right, Porter, before we get out of here, what comes our way on a Thursday edition of the show?
Yeah, on a Thursday edition of the show, we'll welcome back our friend Tony Jones, a little NBA chat with TJ. We'll have a big hour. Both Craig Bowlerjack and Gordon Monson in studio with us. Of course, as we do each Thursday, little sports court action, catching up on the legal stories in sports. And I think, still TBD on this one, but I think Ted Robinson will join us. Of course, I don't really know what Ted's January looks like. I don't think he's doing much on the broadcast beat, but that's our Notre Dame guy. That's our resident Notre Dame insider / fan. So we're gonna check with Ted Robinson. If he can't join us, still TBD on that. We'll still talk college football in that segment.
Also, keep in mind, Mark Harlan will be live in studio to catch up with Sean O'Connell. So tune in to the Sean O'Connell Show from 11 to 2, and then spend your afternoon with us on a Thursday. We'll say goodnight. Special thank you, the voice himself, Bill Riley, Neil Smith, Chris Camerati, as well as Sarah Todd. For any of the sound you may have missed from the show, website is ESPN700sports.com. Download our mobile app. Take us on the go. It's how I listen to our station. The ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store or the Google Play Store. And then for what we do, if you miss any of it, check out our podcast page. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. That's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments. Give us all the stars. It helps. He's Porter. I'm Spence. Say goodnight. Enjoy some Utah women's hoops tonight, and we'll talk to you on a Thursday drive. As always, you can find it right here on ESPN 700.